This is the 2024 A&P Powerplant Written.
1. Preignition is caused by improper ignition timing. 2. Detonation occurs when an area of the combustion chamber becomes incandescent and ignites the air-fuel mixture in advance of normal timed ignition. Regarding the above statements, neither 1 nor 2 is true. If the intake valve is opened too early in the cycle of operation of a 4-stroke cycle engine, it may result in backfiring into the induction system. What is the purpose of a power check on a reciprocating engine? To determine satisfactory performance. Excessive valve clearance results in the valves opening late and closing early. Some aircraft engine manufacturers equip their product with choked or taper ground cylinders in order to provide a straight cylinder bore at operating temperatures. When will small induction system air leaks have the most noticeable effect on engine operation? At low RPM. During overhaul, reciprocating engine exhaust valves are checked for stretch with a contour or radius gauge. Direct mechanical push-pull carburetor heat control linkages should normally be adjusted so that the stop located on the diverter valve will be contacted before the stop at the control lever is reached in both hot and cold positions. Which of the following is a characteristic of a thrust bearing used in most radial engines? Deep groove ball. Using the following information, determine how many degrees the crankshaft will rotate with both the intake and exhaust valves seated. Intake opens 15 degree before top dead center. Exhaust opens 70 degree before bottom dead center. Intake closes 45 degree after bottom dead center. Exhaust closes 10 degree after top dead center. 245 degree. The valve clearance of an engine using hydraulic lifters when the lifters are completely flat or empty should not exceed a specified amount above 0. The 5 events of a 4-stroke cycle engine in the order of their occurrence are intake, compression, ignition, power, and exhaust. When does valve overlap occur in the operation of an aircraft reciprocating engine? At the end of the exhaust stroke and the beginning of the intake stroke. If air is heard coming from the crankcase breather or oil filler during a differential compression check, what is this an indication of? Piston ring leakage. What is the best indication of worn valve guides? High oil consumption. During ground check, an engine is found to be rough running, the magneto drop is normal, and the manifold pressure is higher than normal for any given RPM. The trouble may be caused by a dead cylinder. As the pressure is applied during a reciprocating engine compression check using a differential pressure tester, what would a movement of the propeller in the direction of engine rotation indicate? The piston was positioned past top dead center. 1. Cast iron piston rings may be used in chrome-plated cylinders. 2. Chrome-plated rings may be used in plain steel cylinders. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. Before attempting to start a radial engine that has been shut down for more than 30 minutes, turn the propeller by hand 3 to 4 revolutions in the normal direction of rotation to check for liquid lock. Standard aircraft cylinder oversizes usually range from 0.010 inch to 0.030 inch. Oversize on automobile engine cylinders may range up to 0.100 inch. This is because aircraft engine cylinders have relatively thin walls and may be nitrided. If the hot clearance is used to set the valves when the engine is cold, what will occur during operation of the engine? The valves will open late and close early. During the inspection of an engine control system in which push-pull control rods are used, the threaded rod ends should be checked for the amount of thread engagement by means of the inspection holes. Which of these conditions will cause an engine to have an increased tendency to detonate? High manifold pressure or high intake air temperature? An increase in manifold pressure with a constant RPM will cause the bearing load in an engine to increase. What special procedure must be followed when adjusting the valves of an engine equipped with a floating cam ring? Eliminate cam bearing clearance when making valve adjustment. How may it be determined that a reciprocating engine with a dry sump is pre-oiled sufficiently? Oil will flow from the engine return line or indicator port. Why does the smoothness of operation of an engine increase with a greater number of cylinders? The power impulses are spaced closer together. What is the principal advantage of using propeller reduction gears? To enable the engine RPM to be increased with an accompanying increase in power and allow the propeller to remain at a lower, more efficient RPM. What is the purpose of installing 2 or more springs on each valve in an aircraft engine? To eliminate valve spring vibration or surging. How is proper end gap clearance on new piston rings assured during the overhaul of an engine? By placing the rings in the cylinder and measuring the end gap with a feeler gauge. Which statement is correct regarding a 4-stroke cycle aircraft engine? The intake valve closes on the compression stroke. What could cause excessive pressure buildup in the crankcase of a reciprocating engine? Plugged crankcase breather. By use of a differential pressure compression tester, it is determined that cylinder 3 of a 9-cylinder radial engine will not hold pressure after the crankshaft has been rotated 260 degrees from top dead center compression. Stroke cylinder 1. How can this indication usually be interpreted? A normal indication. The floating control thermostat used on some reciprocating engine installations helps regulate oil temperature by controlling airflow through the oil cooler. One of the best indicators of reciprocating engine combustion chamber problems is spark plug condition. Backfiring through the carburetor generally results from the use of an excessively lean mixture. Which type of bearings are generally used for connecting rods and camshafts? Plain. What is likely to occur if a reciprocating engine is operated at high power settings before it is properly warmed up? Oil starvation of bearings and other parts. Grinding the valves of a reciprocating engine to a feather edge is likely to result in pre-ignition and burned valves. A hissing sound from the exhaust stacks when the propeller is being pulled through manually indicates exhaust valve blow-by. And the actual power delivered to the propeller of an aircraft engine is called brake horsepower. An engine misses in both the right and left positions of the magneto switch. The quickest method for locating the trouble is to check for 1 or more cold cylinders. When is the air-fuel mixture ignited in a conventional reciprocating engine? Shortly before the piston reaches the top of the compression stroke. How many of the following are factors in establishing the maximum compression ratio limitations of an aircraft engine? Detonation characteristics of the fuel, design limitations of the engine, and the degree of supercharging. During overhaul of an engine, a first step of inspection on a crankshaft should be to perform a run-out check. If the ignition switch is moved from both to either left or right during an engine ground check, normal operation is usually indicated by a slight drop in torque meter pressure indication. Which of the following engine servicing operations generally requires engine pre-oiling prior to starting the engine? Engine installation. If an engine with a stroke of 6 inches is operated at 2,000 revolutions per minute, the piston movement within the cylinder will be at maximum velocity, 90 degrees after TDC. What is the basic operational sequence for reducing the power output of an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller? Reduce the manifold pressure, then the RPM. If metallic particles are found in the oil filter during an inspection, the cause should be identified and corrected before the aircraft is released for flight. An unsupercharged aircraft reciprocating engine operated at full throttle from sea level to 10,000 feet, provided the RPM is unchanged, will lose power due to the reduced density of the air drawn into the cylinders. To reduce the power output of an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller and operating near maximum beam EP, the manifold pressure is reduced with the throttle control before the RPM is reduced with the propeller control. Increased water vapor, higher relative humidity in the incoming air to a reciprocating engine will normally result in which of the following? Decreased engine power at a constant RPM and manifold pressure. During routine inspection of a reciprocating engine, a deposit of small, bright metallic particles, which do not cling to the magnetic drain plug, is discovered in the oil sump and on the surface of the oil filter. This condition may be a result of abnormal plane-type bearing wear and is cause for further investigation. Which of the following would indicate a general weak engine condition when operated with a fixed pitch propeller or test club? Lower than normal static RPM, full throttle operation. One cause of after-firing in an aircraft engine is an excessively rich mixture. If the oil pressure gauge fluctuates over a wide range from 0 to normal operating pressure, the most likely cause is low oil supply. Reduced air density at high altitude has a decided effect on carburation, resulting in a reduction of engine power by excessively enriching the fuel-air mixture. Excessive valve clearance in a piston engine decreases valve overlap. Which statement pertaining to air-fuel ratios is true? The mixture ratio, which gives the best power, is richer than the mixture ratio, which gives maximum economy. Valve clearance changes on opposed-type engines using hydraulic lifters are accomplished by pushrod replacement. Engine crankshaft runout is usually checked during engine overhaul and after a prop strike or sudden engine stoppage. If the crankshaft runout readings on the dial indicator are plus 0.002 inch and minus 0.003 inch, the runout is minus 0.005 inch. What is the purpose of the safety circlet installed on some valve stems? To prevent valves from falling into the combustion chamber. Which bearing is least likely to be a roller or ball bearing? Master rod bearing, radial engine. Excessive valve clearances will cause the duration of valve opening to decrease for both intake and exhaust valves. Which of the following will decrease volumetric efficiency in a reciprocating engine? Improper valve timing, sharp bends in the induction system, and high carburetor air temperatures. On which part of the cylinder walls of a normally operating engine will the greatest amount of wear occur? Near the top of the cylinder. Which statement is correct regarding engine crankshafts? Movable counterweights serve to reduce the torsional vibrations in an aircraft reciprocating engine. A characteristic of dynafocal engine mounts as applied to aircraft reciprocating engines is that the shock mounts point toward the engine's center of gravity. After spark plugs from an opposed engine have been serviced, in what position should they be reinstalled? Next in firing order to the one from which they were removed and swapped bottom to top. A 9-cylinder engine with a bore of 5.5 inches and a stroke of 6 inches will have a total piston displacement of minus 1,283 cubic inches. What is required by 14 CFR Part 43? Appendix D when performing an annual 100-hour inspection on a reciprocating engine aircraft. Cylinder compression check. Engine operating flexibility is the ability of the engine to run smoothly and give the desired performance at all speeds. If an engine operates with a low oil pressure and a high oil temperature, the problem may be caused by a leaking oil dilution valve. Some cylinder barrels are hardened by nitriding. Which of the following is most likely to occur if an overhead valve engine is operated with inadequate valve clearances? The valves will not seat positively during start and engine warm-up. The operating temperature valve clearance of a radial engine as compared to cold valve clearance is greater. The horsepower developed in the cylinders of a reciprocating engine is known as the indicated horsepower. Which of the following will be caused by excessive valve clearance of a cylinder on a reciprocating aircraft engine reduced valve overlap period. What will be the likely result if the piston ring gaps happen to be aligned when performing a differential pressure compression check on a cylinder? A worn or defective rings indication. What tool is generally used to measure the crankshaft rotation in degrees? Timing disc. To what altitude will a turbocharged engine maintain sea level pressure? Critical altitude. When cleaning aluminum and magnesium engine parts, it is inadvisable to soak them in solutions containing soap because some of the soap will become impregnated in the surface of the material and subsequently cause engine oil contamination and foaming. An aircraft reciprocating engine using hydraulic valve lifters is observed to have no clearance in its valve operating mechanism after the minimum inlet oil and cylinder head temperatures for takeoff have been reached. When can this condition be expected? During normal operation. If the exhaust valve of a 4-stroke cycle engine is closed and the intake valve is just closed, the piston is on the compression stroke. If the oil pressure of a cold engine is higher than at normal operating temperatures, the engine's lubrication system is probably operating normally. If air-fuel ratio is proper and ignition timing is correct, the combustion process should be completed just after top center at the beginning of the power stroke. What is an advantage of using metallic sodium-filled exhaust valves in aircraft reciprocating engines? Reduced valve operating temperatures. On which strokes are both valves on a 4-stroke cycle reciprocating aircraft engine open? Exhaust and intake. Which of the following conditions would most likely lead to detonation? Use of fuel with too low an octane rating. During overhaul, the disassembled parts of an engine are usually degreased with some form of mineral spirits solvent, rather than water-mixed degreasers, primarily because water-mixed degreaser residues may cause engine oil contamination in the overhauled engine. The primary concern in establishing the firing order for an opposed engine is to provide for balance and eliminate vibration to the greatest extent possible. Full floating piston pins are those which allow motion between the pin and both the piston and the small end of the connecting rod. Which statement is true regarding bearings used in high-powered reciprocating aircraft engines? There is less rolling friction when ball bearings are used than when roller bearings are employed. Campground pistons are installed in some aircraft engines to provide a better fit at operating temperatures. At what speed must a crankshaft turn if each cylinder of a 4-stroke cycle engine is to be fired 200 times a minute, minus 400 revolutions per minute? Compression ratio is the ratio between the cylinder volume with piston at bottom, dead center, and at top dead center. A condition that can occur in radial engines but is unlikely to occur in horizontally opposed engines is hydraulic lock. What does valve overlap promote? Better scavenging and cooling characteristics. If an engine cylinder is to be removed, at what position in the cylinder should the piston be? Top dead center. The volume of a cylinder equals 70 cubic inches when the piston is at bottom center. When the piston is at the top of the cylinder, the volume equals 10 cubic inches. What is the compression ratio? Minus 7 to 1. Which of the following would most likely cause a reciprocating engine to backfire through the induction system at low RPM operation? Lean mixture. The primary purpose in setting proper valve timing and overlap is to obtain the best volumetric efficiency and lower cylinder operating temperatures. Ignition occurs at 28 degrees BTD on a certain 4-stroke cycle engine, and the intake valve opens at 15 degrees BTDC. How many degrees of crankshaft travel after ignition does the intake valve open? Consider one cylinder only, minus 373 degrees. Valve overlap is defined as the number of degrees of crankshaft travel, during which both valves are off their seats. Which condition would be the least likely to be caused by failed or failing engine bearings? Low oil temperatures. Which air-fuel mixture will result in the highest engine temperature? All other factors remaining constant. A mixture leaner than a manual lean mixture of 0.060. When aircraft turbine blades are subjected to excessive heat stress, what type of failures would you expect? Stress rupture. Generally, when maximum APU shaft output power is being used in conjunction with pneumatic power, pneumatic loading will be automatically modulated to maintain a safe EGT. In what section of a turbojet engine is the jet nozzle located? Exhaust. What are the two functional elements in a centrifugal compressor? Impeller and diffuser. An advantage of the centrifugal flow compressor is its high pressure rise per stage. In the dual axial flow or twin spool compressor system, the first stage turbine drives the N2 compressor. Which turbine engine compressor offers the greatest advantages for both starting flexibility and improved high-altitude performance? Split spool axial flow. Which statements are true regarding aircraft engine propulsion? An engine-driven propeller imparts a relatively small amount of acceleration to a large mass of air. If, during inspection, at engine overhaul, ball or roller bearings are found to have magnetism, but otherwise have no defects, they must be degaussed before use. Stator blades in the compressor section of an axial flow turbine engine decrease the air velocity and prevent swirling. A condition known as hot streaking in turbine engines is caused by a partially clogged fuel nozzle. Using standard atmospheric conditions, the standard sea level temperature is -59 degrees Fahrenheit. Who establishes mandatory replacement times for critical components of turbine engines? The engine manufacturer. A turbine engine hot section is particularly susceptible to which kind of damage? Cracking. The stators in the turbine section of a gas turbine engine increase the velocity of the gas flow. Hot section inspections for many modern turbine engines are required on a time or cycle basis. Compressor field cleaning on turbine engines is performed primarily in order to prevent engine performance degradation, increased fuel costs, and damage or corrosion to gas path surfaces. The velocity of supersonic air as it flows through a divergent nozzle increases. A gas turbine engine comprises which three main sections? Turbine, compressor, and combustion. Standard sea level pressure is 29.92 inches Hg. Which of the following acts as a diffuser in a turbine engine and converts velocity to pressure? Stators. An advantage of the axial flow compressor is its high peak efficiency. Frequently, an aircraft's auxiliary power unit, APU, generator is identical to the engine-driven generators. Turbine blades are generally more susceptible to operating damage than compressor blades because of exposure to high temperatures. Which of the following may be used to mark turbine engine components exposed to high temperatures? Layout die. When in operation, the speed of an APU remains at or near rated speed regardless of the load condition. Between each row of rotating blades in a turbine engine compressor, there is a row of stationary blades, which act to diffuse the air. These stationary blades are called stators. A purpose of the shrouds on the turbine blades of an axial flow engine is to reduce vibration. Compressor stall is caused by a high angle of attack airflow through the first stages of compression. The compressor stators in a gas turbine engine act as diffusers to decrease the velocity of the gas flow. Fuel is normally supplied to an APU from the airplane's main fuel tank. What must be done after the fuel control unit has been replaced on an aircraft gas turbine engine? Retrim the engine. Where is the highest gas pressure in a turbojet engine? in the entrance of the burner section. Which statement is true regarding jet engines? At the higher engine speeds, thrust increases rapidly with small increases in RPM. The highest heat-to-metal contact in a jet engine is the turbine inlet guide vanes. An exhaust cone placed aft of the turbine in a jet engine will cause the pressure in the first part of the exhaust duct to increase and the velocity to decrease. Which two elements make up the axial flow compressor assembly? Rotor and stator. The pressure of supersonic air as it flows through a divergent nozzle decreases. Turbine nozzle diaphragms located on the upstream side of each turbine wheel are used in the gas turbine engine to increase the velocity of the heated gases flowing past this point. What is the proper starting sequence for a turbojet engine? Starter, ignition, fuel. The exhaust section of a turbine engine is designed to impart a high exit velocity to the exhaust gases. In which type of turbine engine combustion chamber is the case? And liner removed and installed as one unit during routine maintenance? Can. What is the function of the inlet guide vane assembly on an axial flow compressor? Directs the air into the first stage rotor blades at the proper angle. If a turbine engine is unable to reach takeoff EPR before its EGT limit is reached, this is an indication that the compressor may be contaminated or damaged. Which of the following can cause fan blade shingling in a turbofan engine? Engine overspeed and/or FOD. The non-rotating axial flow compressor airfoils in an aircraft gas turbine engine are called stator vanes. Which of the following is a good indication of a malfunctioning fuel nozzle when inspecting the exhaust section of an aircraft turbine engine? Hotspots on the tail cone. Dirt particles in the air being introduced into the compressor of a turbine engine will form a coating on all but which of the following? Turbine blades. Which of the following influences the operation of an automatic fuel control unit on a turbojet engine? Burner pressure. Who establishes the recommended operating time between overhauls, TBO, of a turbine engine used in general aviation? The engine manufacturer. On APUs equipped with a free turbine and load compressor, the primary function of the load compressor is to provide bleed air for aircraft pneumatic systems. What are the two basic elements of the turbine section in a turbine engine? Stator and rotor. What is the major function of the turbine assembly in a turbojet engine? Supplies the power to turn the compressor. What type of turbine blade is most commonly used in aircraft jet engines? Impulse reaction. Some high-volume turboprop and turbojet engines are equipped with two-spool or split compressors. When these engines are operated at high altitudes, the low-pressure rotor will increase in speed as the compressor load decreases in the lower density air. Which of the following engine variables is the most critical during turbine engine operation? Turbine inlet temperature. Fuel scheduling during APU start and under varying pneumatic bleed and electrical loads is maintained automatically by the APU fuel control system. The fan rotational speed of a dual axial compressor forward fan engine is the same as the low-pressure compressor. Which of the following is the ultimate limiting factor of turbine engine operation? Turbine inlet temperature. What is the purpose of the diffuser section in a turbine engine? To increase pressure and reduce velocity. Which of the following may be used to accomplish internal inspection of an assembled turbine engine? A borescope. What is used in turbine engines to aid in stabilization of compressor airflow during low-thrust engine operation? Variable guide vanes and/or compressor bleed valves. Which of the following factors affect the thermal efficiency of a turbine engine? Turbine inlet temperature, compression ratio, and turbine and compressor efficiency. Severe rubbing of turbine engine compressor blades will usually cause galling. At what stage in a turbine engine are gas pressures the greatest? Compressor outlet. When necessary, APU engine cooling before shutdown may be accomplished by closing the bleed air valve. Where do stress rupture cracks usually appear on turbine blades? Across the leading or trailing edge at a right angle to the edge length. The compression ratio of an axial flow compressor is a function of the number of compressor stages. A cool-off period prior to shutdown of a turbine engine is accomplished in order to allow the turbine wheel to cool before the case contracts around it. 1. In a turbine engine axial flow compressor, each consecutive pair of rotor and stator blades constitutes a pressure stage. 2. In a turbine engine axial flow compressor, the number of rows of stages is determined by the amount of air and total pressure rise required. Regarding the above statements, both number 1 and number 2 are true. Generally, when starting a turbine engine, the starter should be disengaged after the engine has reached self-accelerating speed. What is meant by a shrouded turbine? The turbine blades are shaped so that their ends form a band or shroud. The Brayton cycle is known as the constant pressure cycle. 1. Accumulation of contaminants in the compressor of a turbojet engine reduces aerodynamic efficiency of the blades. 2. Two common methods for removing dirt deposits from turbojet engine compressor blades are a fluid wash and an abrasive grit blast. Regarding the above statements, both number 1 and number 2 are true. What is one purpose of the stator blades in the compressor section of a turbine engine? Control the direction of the airflow. Some engine manufacturers of twin-spool gas turbine engines identify turbine discharge pressure in their maintenance manuals as PT7. Usually, most of the load placed on an APU occurs when the bleed air valve is opened. What type of combustion chamber is used in a turbine engine when engine length is critical? Reverse flow. The two types of centrifugal compressor impellers are single entry and double entry. A turbine engine compressor which contains vanes on both sides of the impeller is a double entry centrifugal compressor. The abbreviation PT7 used in turbine engine terminology means the total pressure at station 7. If the RPM of an axial flow compressor remains constant, the angle of attack of the rotor blades can be changed by changing the velocity of the airflow. Jet engine turbine blades removed for detailed inspection must be reinstalled in the same slot. The function of an APU air inlet plenum is to stabilize the pressure of the air before it enters the compressor. What type igniter plug is used in the low-tension ignition system of an aircraft turbofan engine? Self-ionizing or shunted gap type plug. The function of the exhaust cone assembly of a turbine engine is to straighten and collect the exhaust gases into a solid exhaust jet. In a gas turbine engine, combustion occurs at a constant pressure. What is meant by a double-entry centrifugal compressor? A compressor with vanes on both sides of the impeller. An APU is usually rotated during start by an electric starter. Newton's law of motion, generally termed the law of momentum, states, acceleration is produced when a force acts on a mass. The greater the mass, the greater the amount of force needed. When starting a turbine engine, a hot start is indicated if the exhaust gas temperature exceeds specified limits. At what point in an axial flow turbojet engine will the highest gas pressures occur? At the compressor outlet. Anti-icing of jet engine air inlets is commonly accomplished by engine bleed air ducted through the critical areas. Which of the following types of combustion sections are used in aircraft turbine engines? Multiple can, annular, and can annular. In a dual axial flow compressor, the first stage turbine drives N2 compressor. Newton's first law of motion, generally termed the law of inertia, states, every body persists in its state of rest or of motion in a straight line unless acted upon by some outside force. Three types of turbine blades are impulse reaction and impulse reaction. What is the primary factor which controls the pressure ratio of an axial flow compressor? Number of stages in compressor. What is the function of the stator vane assembly at the discharge end of a typical axial flow compressor? To straighten airflow, to eliminate turbulence. What is the primary advantage of an axial flow compressor over a centrifugal compressor? Greater pressure ratio. In a turbine engine with a dual spool compressor, the low-speed compressor seeks its own best operating speed. 1. Welding and straightening of turbine engine rotating airfoils does not require special equipment. 2. Welding and straightening of turbine engine rotating airfoils is commonly recommended by the manufacturer. Regarding the above statements, neither number 1 nor number 2 is true. The air passing through the combustion chamber of a turbine engine is used to support combustion and to cool the engine. The recurrent ingestion of dust or other fine airborne particulates into a turbine engine can result in erosion damage to the compressor and turbine sections. The turbine section of a jet engine drives the compressor section. In a turbine engine with a dual spool, axial flow compressor, the compressor and high-pressure turbine are each split into two sections. The blending of blades and vanes in a turbine engine should be performed parallel to the length of the blade, using smooth contours to minimize stress points. When starting a turbine engine, a hung start is indicated if the engine fails to reach idle RPM. The stator vanes in an axial flow compressor convert velocity energy into pressure energy. When the leading edge of a first-stage turbine blade is found to have stress rupture cracks, which of the following should be suspected? Over-temperature condition. Hot spots in the combustion section of a turbojet engine are possible indicators of malfunctioning fuel nozzles. Main bearing oil seals used with turbine engines are usually what type pose, labyrinth and/or carbon rubbing. What is the possible cause when a turbine engine indicates no change in power, setting parameters, but oil temperature is high? Engine main bearing distress. Which of the following variables affect the inlet air density of a turbine engine? Speed of the aircraft, altitude of the aircraft, and ambient temperature. The procedure for removing the accumulation of dirt deposits on compressor blades is called field cleaning. How does a dual axial flow compressor improve the efficiency of a turbojet engine? Higher compression ratios can be obtained. In an axial flow compressor, one purpose of the stator vanes at the discharge end of the compressor is to straighten the airflow and eliminate turbulence. What is the purpose of the dump valve used on aircraft gas turbine engines? The fuel is quickly cut off to the nozzles and the manifolds are drained, preventing fuel boiling off as a result of residual engine heat. Reduced blade vibration and improved airflow characteristics in gas turbines are brought about by shrouded turbine rotor blades. Continued and/or excessive heat and centrifugal force on turbine engine rotor blades is likely to cause creep. Turbine engine components exposed to high temperatures generally may not be marked with wax, grease pencil, or a graphite lead pencil. A weak fuel-to-air mixture, along with normal airflow through a turbine engine, may result in a lean die-out. What is the profile of a turbine engine compressor blade? A reduced blade tip thickness. What should be done initially if a turbine engine catches fire when starting? Turn off the fuel and continue engine rotation with the starter. What is the first engine instrument indication of a successful start of a turbine engine? A rise in the exhaust gas temperature. The velocity of subsonic air as it flows through a convergent nozzle increases. What term is used to describe a permanent and cumulative deformation of the turbine blades of a turbojet engine. Creep. The pressure of subsonic air as it flows through a convergent nozzle decreases. The diffuser section of a jet engine is located between the compressor section and the burner section. Why do some turbine engines have more than one turbine wheel attached to a single shaft? To extract more power from the exhaust gases than a single wheel can absorb. The basic gas turbine engine is divided into two main sections, the cold section and the hot section. 1. The cold section includes the engine inlet, compressor, and turbine sections. 2. The hot section includes the combustor, diffuser, and exhaust sections. Regarding the above statements, neither 1 nor 2 is true. And the purpose of a bleed valve located in the beginning stages of the compressor in an aircraft gas turbine engine is to vent some of the air overboard to prevent a compressor stall. One function of the nozzle diaphragm in a turbine engine is to direct the flow of gases to strike the turbine blades at the desired angle. What turbine engine section provides for proper mixing of the fuel and air? Combustion section. Each power plant installed on an airplane with a standard airworthiness certificate must have been type certificated. Select the Airworthiness Directive applicability statement, which applies to an IVO 355 engine, serial number T8164, with 2,100 hours total time and 300 hours since rebuilding. Applies to all IVO 355 engines, serial numbers T8000 through T8300, having less than 2,400 hours total time. The breaking loose of small pieces of metal from coated surfaces, usually caused by defective plating or excessive loads, is called flaking. What publication contains the mandatory replacement time for parts of a turbine engine? Engine manufacturer's service instructions. Determine which portion of the AD is applicable for Model 06 190 series engine, serial number 5863, 40 with 283 hours time in service. This is the compliance portion of an FAA airworthiness directive. Compliance required as indicated. B. For Model 06 190 series engines. Serial nose 5265, 40 through 6129, 40 and IO 690 series engines. Serial nose 424, 48 through 551, 48 compliance with C required as follows. 1. Within 25 hours time in service after the effective date of this AD, and every 100 hours time in service thereafter. For engines with more than 275 hours time in service on the effective date of this AD. B1. What maintenance record S is R required following a major repair of an aircraft engine? Entries in the engine maintenance record and FAA Form 337. Which of the following contains approved data for performing a major repair to an aircraft engine? Manufacturer's maintenance instructions when FAA approved. A service bulletin, SB, must be complied with, only when referred to in an airworthiness directive, AD. A Cessna 180 aircraft has a Macaulay propeller model. Number 2A34C50/90A. The propeller is severely damaged in a ground accident, and this model propeller is not available for replacement. Which of the following should be used to find an approved alternate replacement? Aircraft specifications, type certificate data sheets. Which of the following contains a table that lists the engines to which a given propeller is adaptable? Propeller type certificate data sheets. The airworthiness standards for the issue of type certificates for small airplanes with 9 or less passenger seats in the normal, utility, and acrobatic categories may be found in the E, minus 14. CFR Part 23. Which of the following is used to monitor the mechanical integrity of the turbines, as well as to check engine operating conditions of a turbine engine? Exhaust gas temperature. Where would one find type design information for an R 1830-92 engine certificated under the Civil Air Regulations, CAR, and installed on a DC-3? The aircraft engine specifications. What section in the instructions for continued airworthiness is FAA approved? Airworthiness Limitations section. You are performing a 100-hour inspection on an R985-22 aircraft engine. What does the 985 indicate? The total piston displacement of the engine. When inspecting an aircraft reciprocating engine, what document is used to determine if the proper magnetos are installed? Aircraft engine specifications or type certificate data sheets. Which of the following can inspect and approve an engine major repair for return to service? Certificated mechanic with inspection authorization. 1. Airworthiness directives are federal aviation regulations and must be complied with unless specific exemption is granted. 2. Airworthiness directives of an emergency nature may require immediate compliance upon receipt. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. On a reciprocating engine aircraft using a shrouded exhaust muffler system as a source for cabin heat, the exhaust system should be visually inspected for any indication of cracks, or an operational carbon monoxide detection test should be done. Straightening nitrided crankshafts is not recommended. A ground incident that results in propeller sudden stoppage would require a crankshaft runout inspection. What publication would be used to obtain crankshaft runout tolerance? Current manufacturer's maintenance instructions. A severe condition of chafing or fretting in which a transfer of metal from one part to another occurs is called galling. Indentations on bearing races caused by high static loads are known as Brinelling. What publication is used for guidance to determine whether a power plant repair is major or minor? Minus 14 CFR Part 43. When must an airworthiness directive, AD, be complied with after it becomes effective? As specified in the AD. Which of the following component inspections is to be accomplished on a 100-hour inspection? Check cylinder compression. How is the flow range of the fuel discharge nozzles installed in a fuel-injected reciprocating engine indicated? By a letter stamped on the hex of the nozzle body. Which of the following contains a minimum checklist for 100-hour inspections of engines? Minus 14. CFR Part 43, Appendix D. Which of the following conditions is usually not acceptable to any extent in turbine blades? Cracks. 1. Serviceability limits for turbine blades are much more stringent than are those for turbine nozzle vanes. 2. A limited number of small nicks and dents can usually be permitted in any area of a turbine blade. Regarding the above statements, only one is true. The fuel flow meter used with a continuous fuel injection system installed on an aircraft, horizontally opposed. Reciprocating engines measures the fuel pressure drop across the fuel nozzles. In addition to fuel quantity, a computerized fuel system, CFS, with a totalizer indicator provides indication of how many of the following: 1. Fuel flow rate. 2. Fuel used since reset or initial startup. 3. Fuel time remaining at current power setting. 4. Fuel temperature. 3. The thermocouple leads used to measure cylinder temperature on an aircraft reciprocating engine are connected to the electrical wiring on one end and the cylinder on the other end. Engine oil temperature gauges indicate the temperature of the oil entering the engine. In what units are turbine engine tachometers calibrated? Percent of engine RPM. In regard to using a turbine engine oil analysis program, which of the following is not true? Generally, an accurate trend forecast may be made after an engine's first oil sample analysis. A common type of electrically operated oil temperature gauge utilizes either a Wheatstone bridge or a ratiometer circuit. The fuel flow indication system, used with many fuel-injected opposed engine airplanes, utilizes a measure of fuel pressure. Which unit most accurately indicates fuel consumption of a reciprocating engine? Fuel flow meter. 1. Power plant instrument range markings show whether the current state of power plant operation is normal, acceptable for a limited time, or unauthorized. 2. Power plant instrument range markings are based on installed engine operating limits, which may not exceed, but are not necessarily equal to, those limits shown on the engine type certificate datasheet. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. What instrument on a gas turbine engine should be monitored to minimize the possibility of a hot start? Turbine inlet temperature. Basically, the indicator of a tachometer system is responsive to change in frequency. A change in engine manifold pressure has a direct effect on the mean effective cylinder pressure. Which of the following types of electric motors are commonly used in electric tachometers? Synchronous motors. Which of the following is a primary engine instrument? Tachometer, in an aircraft equipped with a pressure drop type fuel flow indicating system. If one of the injector nozzles becomes restricted, this would cause a decrease in fuel flow with an increased fuel flow indication on the gauge. Which of the following instrument conditions is acceptable and does not require immediate correction? Case paint chipped. The RPM indication of a synchronous AC motor tachometer is governed by the generator. Frequency. The principal fault in the pressure type fuel flow meter indicating system, installed on a horizontally opposed continuous flow fuel injected aircraft reciprocating engine, is that a plugged fuel injection nozzle will cause a higher than normal fuel flow indication. Engine pressure ratio is the total pressure ratio between the front of the compressor and the rear of the turbine. In a turbine engine, where is the turbine discharge pressure indicator sensor located? Immediately aft of the last turbine stage. Motor-driven impeller and turbine fuel flow transmitters are designed to transmit data using aircraft electrical system power. The fuel flow indication data sent from motor-driven impeller and turbine and motorless type fuel flow transmitters is a measure of fuel mass flow. Which statement is correct concerning a thermocouple type temperature indicating instrument system? It requires no external power source. Which statement is true regarding thermocouple type cylinder head temperature measuring system? The voltage output of a thermocouple system is determined by the temperature difference between the two ends of the thermocouple. Where are the hot and cold junctions located in an engine cylinder temperature indicating system? The hot junction is located at the cylinder, and the cold junction is located at the instrument. Why do helicopters require a minimum of 2 synchronous tachometer systems? One indicates engine RPM and the other main rotor RPM. A Borden tube instrument may be used to indicate pressure and temperature. The fuel flow meter indicator rotor and needle for a motor impeller and turbine indicating system is driven by an electrical signal. A complete break in the line between the manifold pressure gauge and the induction system will be indicated by the gauge registering prevailing atmospheric pressure. What is the primary purpose of the tachometer on an axial compressor turbine engine? Monitor engine RPM during starting and to indicate overspeed conditions. Instruments that measure relatively high fluid pressures, such as oil pressure gauges, are usually what type? Borden tube. 1. Engine pressure ratio, EPR, is a ratio of the exhaust gas pressure to the engine inlet air pressure and indicates the thrust produced. 2. Engine pressure ratio, EPR, is a ratio of the exhaust gas pressure to the engine inlet air pressure and indicates volumetric efficiency. Regarding the above statements, only one is true. The purpose of an exhaust gas analyzer is to indicate the fuel-air ratio being burned in the cylinders. If the thermocouple leads were inadvertently crossed at installation, what would the cylinder temperature gauge pointer indicate? Moves off scale on the 0 side of the meter. Thermocouple leads are designed for a specific installation and may not be altered. What does the blue arc on a cylinder head temperature, CHT, gauge represent? The range within which operation is permitted in auto lean. Turbine engine EGT thermocouples are constructed of chromel and alumel. 1. Generally, when a turbine engine indicates high EGT for a particular EPR, when there is no significant damage, it means that the engine is out of trim. 2. Some turbine-powered aircraft use RPM as the primary indicator of thrust produced. Others use EPR as the primary indicator. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. The engine pressure ratio EPR indicator is a direct indication of engine thrust being produced. On an aircraft turbine engine operating at a constant power, the application of engine anti-icing will result in noticeable shift in EPR. What would be the possible cause if a gas turbine engine has high exhaust gas temperature, high fuel flow, and low RPM at all engine power settings? Turbine damage or loss of turbine efficiency. An electronic system that monitors engine and airframe parameters and does not utilize traditional engine gauges is called an engine indicating and crew alerting system, EKS. Which of the following instrument discrepancies require replacement of the instrument? Glass cracked, will not zero out, pointer loose on shaft, fogged. What unit in a tachometer system sends information to the indicator? The three-phase AC generator. Engine pressure ratio is determined by dividing turbine outlet total pressure by engine inlet total pressure. A red triangle, dot, or diamond mark on an engine instrument. Face or glass indicates the maximum limit for high transients, such as starting, an indication of unregulated power changes that result in continual drift of manifold pressure indication. On a turbo-supercharged aircraft engine is known as re-bootstrapping. The exhaust gas temperature, EEGT indicator on a gas turbine engine provides a relative indication of the turbine inlet temperature. The EGT gauge used with reciprocating engines is primarily used to furnish temperature readings in order to obtain the best mixture setting for fuel efficiency. On a twin-engine aircraft with fuel-injected reciprocating engines, one fuel flow meter reads considerably higher than the other in all engine operating configurations. What is the probable cause of this indication? One or more fuel nozzles are clogged. Instruments that provide readings of low or negative pressure, such as manifold pressure gauges, are usually what type? Diaphragm or bellows. A manifold pressure gauge is designed to indicate absolute pressure in the intake manifold. What basic meter is used to indicate cylinder head temperature in most aircraft? Galvanometer. The indication on a thermocouple type cylinder head temperature indicator is produced by a current generated by the temperature difference between dissimilar metal hot and cold junctions. What instrument indicates the thrust of a gas turbine engine? Engine pressure ratio indicator. What retains the nitrogen charge and fire extinguishing agent in a high rate of discharge, HRD container? Breakable disc and fusible disc. A fuel or oil fire is defined as a Class B fire. Two continuous loop fire detection systems that will not test due to a broken detector element are the Kitty system and the Fenwal system. Which of the following fire detection systems will detect a fire when an element is inoperative, but will not test when the test circuit is energized? The Kitty system and the Fenwal system. The fire detection system that uses two wires embedded in a ceramic core within a tube is the Kitty system. The most common type of portable fire extinguisher available on the ramp to fight fires on the exterior of aircraft Uses what type of extinguishing agent? Carbon dioxide, CO2. How is the fire extinguishing agent distributed in the engine section? Spray nozzles and perforated tubing. The fire detection system that uses a single wire surrounded by a continuous string of ceramic beads in a tube is the Fenwall system, a continuous loop fire detector. Is what type of detector? Overheat detector. Refer to Figure 3. What are the fire extinguisher container pressure limits when the temperature is 50 degrees Fahrenheit? Minus 475. 625 CG. The use of water on Class D fires will cause the fire to burn more violently and can cause explosions. Which statement best describes the blowout type indicator disc on a fixed fire extinguishing system? When the yellow indicator disc is missing, it indicates the fire extinguishing system has been normally discharged. Which of the following fire detection systems are commonly used in an engine nacelle? KIDA continuous loop. The pulling out or down of an illuminated fire handle in a typical large jet aircraft fire protection system commonly accomplishes what events? Closes fuel shutoff. Closes hydraulic shutoff. Disconnects the generator field. And arms the fire extinguishing system. A fire involving energized electrical equipment is defined as a Class C fire. What is the operating principle of the spot detector sensor in a fire detection system? A bimetallic thermoswitch that closes when heated to a high temperature. After a fire is extinguished or overheat condition removed in aircraft equipped with a Cistron-Donner fire detector, the detection system automatically resets. Why does one type of Fenwall fire detection system use spot detectors wired in parallel between two separate circuits so that a single fault may exist in the system without sounding a false alarm? Which of the following fire detection systems measures temperature rise compared to a reference temperature? Thermocouple. Which of the following fire detection systems uses heat in the normal testing of the system? The thermocouple system and the Lindbergh system. Refer to Figure 2. Determine the fire extinguisher container pressure limits when the temperature is 75 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 338 minimum and 424 maximum. Which of the following is not used to detect fires in reciprocating engine nacelles? Smoke detectors. Which of the following is the safest fire extinguishing agent to use from a standpoint of toxicity and corrosion hazards? Bromotrifluoromethane, Halon 1301. How are most aircraft turbine engine fire extinguishing systems activated? Electrically discharged cartridges. What is the function of a fire detection system? To activate a warning device in the event of a power plant fire. The explosive cartridge in the discharge valve of a fire extinguisher container is a life-dated unit. What is the principle of operation of the continuous loop fire detector system sensor? Core resistance material which prevents current flow at normal temperatures. A fire detection system operates on the principle of a buildup of gas pressure within a tube proportional to temperature. Which of the following systems does this statement define? Lindbergh continuous element system. The most satisfactory extinguishing agent for a tailpipe or intake fire is carbon dioxide. A fire detection system that operates on the rate of temperature rise is a thermocouple system. And the most satisfactory extinguishing agent for an electrical fire is carbon dioxide. For fire detection and extinguishing purposes, aircraft power plant areas are divided into fire zones based on the volume and smoothness of the airflow through engine compartments. How does carbon dioxide, CO2, extinguish an aircraft engine fire? Contact with the air converts the liquid into snow and gas, which smothers the flame. The part of a DC alternator power system that prevents reverse flow of current from the battery to the alternator is the rectifier. Electrical switches are rated according to the voltage and the current they can control. 1. Alternators are rated in volt amps. which is a measure of the apparent power being produced by the generator. 2. Alternating current has the advantage over direct current in that its voltage and current can easily be stepped up or down. Regarding the above statements, both number 1 and number 2 are true. What is the maximum number of bonding jumper wires that may be attached to one terminal grounded to a flat surface? 4. The generating system of an aircraft charges the battery by using constant voltage and varying current. The resistance of the current return path through the aircraft is always considered negligible, provided the structure is adequately bonded. What are two types of AC motors that are used to produce a relatively high torque? Three-phase induction and capacitor start. What is a basic advantage of using AC for electrical power for a large aircraft? AC systems operate at higher voltage than DC systems, and therefore use less current and can use smaller and lighter weight wiring. The most effective method of regulating aircraft direct current generator output is to vary, according to the load requirements, the strength of the stationary field. As the flux density in the field of a DC generator increases and the current flow to the system increases, the force required to turn the generator increases. How many hours will a 140 ampere-hour battery deliver 15 amperes? Minus 9.33 hours. As the generator load is increased within its rated capacity, the voltage will remain constant and the amperage output will increase. What type of lubricant may be used to aid in pulling electrical wires or cables through conduits? Soapstone talc. What is the smallest terminal stud allowed for aircraft electrical power systems? No 10. Alternators, AC generators that are driven by a constant speed drive, CSD mechanism, are used to regulate the alternator to a constant Hertz output. What is the purpose of a reverse current cutout relay? It opens the main generator circuit whenever the generator voltage drops below the battery voltage. One way that the automatic ignition relight systems are activated on gas turbine engines is by a drop-in compressor discharge pressure. What type of electric motor is generally used with a direct cranking engine starter? Direct current series wound motor. What is used to polish commutators or slip rings? Double zero sandpaper. A high surge of current is required when a DC electric motor is first started. As the speed of the motor increases, the counter EMF builds up and opposes the applied EMF, thus reducing the current flow through the armature. The constant current method of charging a nickel-cadmium battery is the method most effective in maintaining cell balance. How are the rotor windings of an aircraft alternator usually excited? By a variable direct current. Refer to Figure 4. The following data concerning the installation of an electrical unit is known. Current requirements for continuous operation: 11 amperes, measured cable length, 45 feet, system voltage, 28 volts, do not exceed 1 volt drop, cable in conduit and bundles. What is the minimum size copper electrical cable that may be selected? No, 12. The maximum allowable voltage drop between the generator and the bus bar is minus 2% of the regulated voltage. The reason for flashing the field in a generator is to restore residual magnetism to the field frame. Aircraft electrical wire is manufactured in sizes according to a standard known as American Wire Gauge, AWG. 1. Electrical wires larger than 10 gauge use uninsulated terminals. 2. Electrical wires smaller than 10 gauge use uninsulated terminals. Regarding the above statements, only one is true. Aircraft wire size is determined by using AN wire gauge. Starter brushes should be replaced when they are worn down to 1/2 of the original length. Refer to Figure 4. In a 28-volt system, what is the maximum continuous current that can be carried by a single number 10 copper wire, 25 feet long, routed in free air, minus 35 amperes. The time current capacities of a circuit breaker or fuse must be below those of the associated conductor. Arcing at the brushes and burning of the commutator of a motor may be caused by weak brush springs. Upon what does the output frequency of an AC generator, alternator depend? The speed of rotation and the number of field poles. Which of the following federal aviation regulations require that all aircraft using fuses as the circuit protective devices carry one spare set of fuses or 3 spare fuses of each kind required? Minus 14 CFR Part 91. 1. Most modern aircraft use circuit breakers rather than fuses to protect their electrical circuits. 2. Part 23 requires that all electrical circuits incorporate some form of circuit protective device. Regarding the above statements, only one is true. Which of the following is regulated in a generator to control its voltage output, the strength of the field? When selecting an electrical switch for installation in an aircraft circuit, utilizing a direct current motor, a derating factor should be applied. On-off 2-position engine electrical switches should be installed, so the on position is reached by a forward or upward motion. Bonding jumpers should be designed and installed in such a manner that they provide a low electrical resistance in the ground circuit. What is the ampere-hour rating of a storage battery that is designed to deliver 45 amperes for 2.5 hours? Minus 112.5 ampere hour. Which federal aviation regulation specifies that each resettable circuit protective device requires a manual operation to restore service after the device has interrupted the circuit? Minus 14. CFR Part 23. In order to reduce the possibility of ground shorting the circuits when the connectors are separated for maintenance, the AN and MS electrical connectors should be installed with the pin section on the ground side of the electrical circuit. Aircraft that operate more than one generator connected to a common electrical system must be provided with individual generator switches that can be operated from the cockpit during flight. When installing an electrical switch, under which of the following conditions should the switch be derated from its nominal current rating? Direct current motor circuits. The stationary field strength in a direct current generator is varied according to the load requirements. The maximum number of terminals that may be connected to any one terminal stud in an aircraft electrical system is 4. Aircraft copper electrical wire is coated with tin, silver, or nickel in order to prevent oxidization. How many basic types of circuit breakers are used in power plant installation electrical systems? 3. Why is a constant speed drive used to control the speed of some aircraft engine-driven generators? So that the frequency of the alternating current output will remain constant. Generator voltage will not build up when the field is flashed, and solder is found on the brush cover plate. These are most likely indications of an open armature. Which of the following aircraft circuits does not contain a fuse circuit breaker? Starter circuit. When does current flow through the coil of a solenoid-operated electrical switch? Continually, as long as the control circuit is complete. What device is used to convert alternating current, which has been induced into the loops of the rotating armature of a DC generator, to direct current? A commutator. If the points in a vibrator-type voltage regulator stick in the closed position while the generator is operating, what will be the probable result? Generator output voltage will increase. If a generator is malfunctioning, its voltage can be reduced to residual by actuating the generator master switch. Electrical circuit protection devices are installed primarily to protect the wiring. A term commonly used when 2 or more electrical terminals are installed on a single lug of a terminal strip is stacking. Which federal aviation regulation requirement prevents the use of automatic reset circuit breakers? Minus 14 CFR Part 23. When the starter switch to the aircraft gas turbine engine starter generator is energized and the engine fails to rotate, one of the probable causes would be the starter solenoid is defective. When a 28-volt, 75-ampere generator is installed on an aircraft, an electrical load analysis ground check is performed, and it is determined that the battery is furnishing 57 amperes to the system, with all electrical equipment operating. This indicates the load will be within the generator load limit. What is the frequency of most aircraft alternating current? Minus 400 Hertz. Why is it unnecessary to flash the field of the exciter on a brushless alternator? Permanent magnets are installed in the main field poles. A typical barrier-type aircraft terminal strip is made of paper-based phenolic compound. What precaution is usually taken to prevent electrolyte from freezing in a lead-acid battery? Keep the battery fully charged. Electric motors are often classified according to the method of connecting the field coils and armature. Aircraft engine starter motors are generally of which type? Series. What speed must an 8-pole AC generator turn to produce 400 Hertz AC? Minus 6,000 revolutions per minute. 1. Electrical circuit protection devices are rated based on the amount of current that can be carried without overheating the wiring insulation. 2. A trip-free circuit breaker makes it impossible to manually hold the circuit closed when excessive current is flowing. Regarding the above statements, both number 1 and number 2 are true. When installing electrical wiring parallel to a fuel line, the wiring should be above the fuel line. A certain direct current series motor mounted within an aircraft draws more amperes during start than when it is running under its rated load. The most logical conclusion that may be drawn is the condition is normal for this type of motor. According to the electron theory of the flow of electricity, when a properly functioning DC alternator and voltage regulating system is charging an aircraft's battery, the direction of current flow through the battery is into the negative terminal and out the positive terminal. Why is expansion space required in an engine oil supply tank? For oil enlargement and collection of foam. Oil accumulation in the cylinders of an inverted inline engine and in the lower cylinders of a radial engine is normally reduced or prevented by extended cylinder skirts. Compared to reciprocating engine oils, the types of oils used in turbine engines have less tendency to produce lacquer or coke. In a reciprocating engine, oil is directed from the pressure relief valve to the inlet side of the pressure pump. What is the primary purpose of changing aircraft engine lubricating oils at predetermined periods? The oil becomes contaminated with moisture, acids, and finely divided, suspended solid particles. 1. Wet sump oil systems are most commonly used in gas turbine engines. 2. In most turbine engine oil tanks, a slight pressurization of the tank is desired to ensure a positive flow of oil. Regarding the above statements, only 2 is true. Which of the following has the greatest effect on the viscosity of lubricating oil? Temperature. Where are sludge chambers when used in aircraft engine lubrication systems, usually located in the crankshaft throws, the vent line connecting the oil supply tank and the engine in some dry sump engine installations permits the oil tank to be vented through the normal engine vent. Where is the oil temperature bulb located on a dry sump reciprocating engine? Oil inlet line. The main oil filters strain the oil at which point in the system? Just as it leaves the pressure pump. An oil separator is generally associated with which of the following? Engine-driven vacuum pump. How are the teeth of the gears in the accessory section of an engine normally lubricated? By splashed or sprayed oil. Some larger reciprocating engines use a compensating oil pressure relief valve to provide a high engine oil pressure when the oil is cold and automatically lower the oil pressure when the oil warms up. What will result if an oil filter becomes completely blocked? Oil will flow at the normal rate through the system. The type of oil pumps most commonly used on turbine engines are classified as positive displacement. What is the primary purpose of the hopper located in the oil supply tank of some dry sump engine installations? To reduce the time required to warm the oil to operating temperatures. What unit in an aircraft engine lubrication system is adjusted to maintain the desired system pressure? Oil pressure relief valve. What type of oil do most engine manufacturers recommend after new reciprocating engine break-in? Ashless dispersant oil. What type of oil do most engine manufacturers recommend for new reciprocating engine break-in? Straight mineral oil. Which of the following helps determine the proper grade of oil to use in a particular engine? Operating speeds of bearings. The valve assemblies of opposed reciprocating engines are lubricated by means of a pressure system. What will happen to the return oil if the oil line between the scavenger pump and the oil cooler separates? The return oil will be pumped overboard. In order to maintain a constant oil pressure, as the clearances between the moving parts of an engine increase through normal wear, the supply pump output remains relatively constant at a given RPM, with less oil being returned to the pump inlet by the relief valve. Lube system last chance filters in turbine engines are usually cleaned during overhaul. Low oil pressure can be detrimental to the internal engine components. However, high oil pressure should be limited to the engine manufacturer's recommendations. Why are fixed orifice nozzles used in the lubrication system of gas turbine engines? To provide a relatively constant oil flow to the main bearings at all engine speeds. As a general rule, the mixture setting on a reciprocating engine operating at or near takeoff power that provides the best cooling is full rich. Lubricating oils with high viscosity index ratings are oils, in which the viscosity does not vary much with temperature change. A turbine engine dry sump lubrication system of the self-contained high-pressure design consists of pressure, breather, and scavenge subsystems. Which of the following bearing types must be continuously lubricated by pressure oil? Plain. The time in seconds required for exactly 60 cubic centimeters of oil to flow through an accurately calibrated orifice at a specific temperature is recorded as a measurement of the oil's viscosity. The purpose of a relief valve installed in the tank venting system of a turbine engine oil tank is to prevent oil pump cavitation by maintaining a constant pressure on the oil pump inlet. What is the primary purpose of the oil breather pressurization system that is used on turbine engines? Provides a proper oil spray pattern from the main bearing oil jets. In a reciprocating engine oil system, the temperature bulb senses oil temperature at a point after the oil is passed through the oil cooler. As an aid to cold weather starting, the oil dilution system thins the oil with gasoline. Where is the oil of a dry sump reciprocating engine exposed to the temperature control valve sensing unit? Oil cooler inlet. How are the piston pins of most aircraft engines lubricated? By oil which is sprayed or thrown by the master or connecting rods. If all other requirements can be met, what type of oil should be used to achieve theoretically perfect engine lubrication? The thinnest oil that will stay in place and maintain a reasonable film strength. An engine lubrication system, pressure relief valve, is usually located between the pump and the internal oil system. If an oil filter element becomes completely clogged, the bypass valve will open, and the oil pump will supply unfiltered oil. Under which of the following conditions is the oil cooler flow control valve open on a reciprocating engine? When the temperature of the oil returning from the engine is too low. The recommended aircraft engine lubricants are mineral or synthetic based. After making a welded repair to a pressurized type turbine engine oil tank, the tank should be pressure checked to not less than 5 psi plus the maximum operating pressure of the tank. An oil tank having a capacity of 5 gallons must have an expansion space of -2 quarts. Upon what quality or characteristic of a lubricating oil is its viscosity index based? Its rate of change in viscosity with temperature change. High tooth pressures and high rubbing velocities, such as occur with spur-type gears, require the use of an EP lubricant. What is the purpose of the last chance oil filters? To filter the oil immediately before it enters the main bearings. The purpose of the flow control valve in a reciprocating engine oil system is to direct oil through or around the oil cooler. Which of the following prevents oil from entering the main accessory case when the engine is not running? Check valve. What type of oil system is usually found on turbine engines? Dry sump, pressure, and spray. The pumping capacity of the scavenger pump in a dry sump aircraft engine's lubrication system is greater than the capacity of the oil supply pump. What advantage do mineral-based lubricants have over vegetable oil-based lubricants when used in aircraft engines? Chemical stability. Which of the following is a function of the fuel-oil heat exchanger on a turbojet engine? Increases fuel temperature. The primary source of oil contamination in a normally operating reciprocating engine is combustion deposits due to combustion chamber blowby and oil migration on the cylinder walls. The oil-dampened main bearing utilized in some turbine engines is used to provide an oil film between the outer race and the bearing housing in order to reduce vibration tendencies in the rotor system and to allow for slight misalignment. At cruise RPM, some oil will flow through the relief valve of a gear-type engine oil pump. This is normal as the relief valve is set at a pressure which is lower than the pressure pump capabilities. According to the Federal Aviation Regulations, oil tank fillers on turbine engines must be marked with the word oil. Which of the following factors has the least effect on the oil consumption of a specific engine? Mechanical efficiency. The viscosity of a liquid is a measure of its resistance to flow. Oil picks up the most heat from which of the following turbine engine components? Turbine bearing. In a jet engine which uses a fuel-oil heat exchanger, the oil temperature is controlled by a thermostatic valve that regulates the flow of oil through the heat exchanger. When servicing a turbine engine oil system, the proper type of servicing equipment and procedures can be found in the Aircraft Maintenance Manual, MM. In order to relieve excessive pump pressure in an engine's internal oil system, most engines are equipped with a relief valve. As a general rule, a small amount of small fuzzy particles or gray metallic paste on a turbine engine magnetic chip detector is considered to be the result of normal wear. In which of the following situations will the oil cooler automatic bypass valve be open the greatest amount? Engine oil below normal operating temperature. What prevents pressure within the lubricating oil tank from rising above or falling below ambient pressure? Reciprocating engine. Oil tank vent. How is the oil collected by the piston oil ring returned to the crankcase? Through holes drilled in the piston oil ring groove. What is the purpose of the check valve generally used in a dry sump lubrication system? To prevent the oil from the supply tank from seeping into the crankcase during inoperative periods. The purpose of a dwell chamber in a turbine engine oil tank is to provide separation of entrained air from scavenged oil. 1. Fuel may be used to cool oil in gas turbine engines. 2. Ram air may be used to cool oil in gas turbine engines. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. The engine oil temperature regulator is usually located between which of the following on a dry sump, reciprocating engine? The scavenger pump outlet and the oil storage tank. The basic oil pressure relief valve setting for a newly overhauled engine is made in the overhaul shop. What is the primary purpose of the fuel oil heat exchanger? Cool the oil. Why is an aircraft reciprocating engine oil tank on a dry sump lubrication system equipped with a vent line to prevent pressure buildup in the oil tank? What will be the result of operating an engine in extremely high temperatures using a lubricant recommended by the manufacturer for a much lower temperature? The oil pressure will be lower than normal. Which of these characteristics is desirable in turbine engine oil? High flash point. Oil tank fillers on reciprocating engines are marked with the word oil in accordance with 14 CFR Part 25. The oil used in reciprocating engines has a relatively high viscosity due to large clearances and high operating temperatures. What is the source of most of the heat that is absorbed by the lubricating oil in a reciprocating engine? Pistons and cylinder walls. Cylinder walls are usually lubricated by splashed or sprayed oil. Specific gravity is a comparison of the weight of a substance to the weight of an equal volume of distilled water at a specific temperature. What would be the probable result if the oil system pressure relief valve should stick in the open position on a turbine engine? Insufficient lubrication. Which of the following lubrication system components is never located between the pressure pump and the engine pressure system? Fuel line for oil dilution system. Possible failure-related ferrous metal particles in turbine engine oil cause an electrical indicating type magnetic chip detector to indicate their presence by bridging the gap between the detector center positive electrode and the ground electrode. If the oil in the oil cooler core and annular jacket becomes congealed, what unit prevents damage to the cooler? Surge protection valve. Manufacturers normally require turbine engine oil servicing within a short time after engine shutdown, primarily to prevent over-servicing. Excessive oil is prevented from accumulating on the cylinder walls of a reciprocating engine by oil control rings on the pistons. What determines the minimum particle size which will be excluded or filtered by a Kuno, stacked disc, edge filtration, filter? The spacer thickness. In an axial flow turbine engine, compressor bleed air is sometimes used to aid in cooling the turbine, vanes, blades, and bearings. A drop in oil pressure may be caused by foreign material under the relief valve. The purpose of directing bleed air to the outer turbine case on some engines is to provide optimum turbine blade tip clearance by controlling thermal expansion. 1. Gas turbine and reciprocating engine oils can be mixed or used interchangeably. 2. Most gas turbine engine oils are synthetic. Regarding the above statements, only 2 is true. Aircraft magneto housings are usually ventilated in order to provide cooling and remove corrosive gases produced by normal arcing. In reference to a shower of sparks ignition system, 1. The retard breaker points are designed to keep the affected ignition system operating if the advanced breaker points should fail during normal engine operation after start. 2. The timed opening of the retard breaker points is designed to prevent engine kickback during start. Regarding the above statements, only 2 is true. In an aircraft ignition system, one of the functions of the capacitor is to facilitate a more rapid collapse of the magnetic field in the primary coil. Refer to Figure 5. The type of system depicted is capable of operating with either battery or external power. What would be the result if a magneto breaker point mainspring did not have sufficient tension? The points will float or bounce. If staggered ignition timing is used, the spark plug nearest the exhaust valve will fire first. Which of the following statements regarding magneto switch circuits is not true? In the both position, the right and left magneto circuits are grounded. The term reach, as applied to spark plug design and/or type, indicates the linear distance from the shell gasket seat to the end of the threads on the shell skirt. When a magneto is operating, What is the probable cause for a shift in internal timing? The cam follower wear and/or the breaker points wear. Which of the following could cause damage to the nose ceramic or to the electrode of an aircraft spark plug? Improper gapping procedure. The amount of voltage generated in any magnetosecondary coil is determined by the number of windings and by the rate of collapse of the magnetic field around the primary coil. If the ground wire of a magneto is disconnected at the ignition switch, the result will be the engine will not stop running when the ignition switch is turned off. When a shower of sparks ignition system is activated at an engine start, a spark plug fires only while both the retard and advanced breaker points are open. Refer to Figure 5. With power applied to the bus bar, what switch changes will allow the ignition exciter's test switch to function? Engine master switch and ignition switch. A magneto ignition switch is connected parallel to the breaker points. Refer to Figure 5. Which malfunctions will allow the igniters to operate normally during start, but be inoperative when tested? Wire 14 or 15 is broken. The numbers appearing on the ignition distributor block indicate the sparking order of the distributor. The spark is produced in a magneto ignition system when the breaker points are beginning to open. If it is found that a shielded ignition system does not adequately reduce ignition noise, it may be necessary to install a filter between the magneto and magneto switch. A safety feature usually employed in pneumatic starters that is used if the clutch does not release from the engine drive at the proper time during start is the drive shaft shear point. Which of the following are included in a typical turbine engine ignition system? 2 igniter plugs, 1 exciter unit, and 2 high-tension igniter leads. In a typical starter generator system, under which of the following starting circumstances may it be necessary to use the start-stop button? Hung start. What is the purpose of using an impulse coupling with a magneto? To produce a momentary high rotational speed of the magneto. Sharp bends should be avoided in ignition leads is primarily because weak points may develop in the insulation through which high-tension current can leak. The magnetic circuit of a magneto consists of a permanent multi-pole rotating magnet. The core is made of soft iron. What will be the result of using too hot a spark plug? Pre-ignition. What is the purpose of a safety gap in some magnetos? To discharge the secondary coil's voltage if an open occurs in the secondary circuit. Capacitance after firing of a spark plug is caused by the stored energy in the ignition shielded lead unloading after normal timed ignition. When using an electric starter motor, the current flow through it is highest at the start of motor rotation. What are 2 parts of a distributor in an aircraft engine ignition system? Block and rotor. Why do turbine engine ignition systems require high energy? To ignite the fuel under conditions of high altitude and low temperatures. Magneto breaker point opening relative to the position of the rotating magnet and distributor rotor, internal timing, can be set most accurately during assembly of the magneto, before installation on the engine. Spark plug fouling caused by lead deposits occurs most often when cylinder head temperatures are relatively low. In a high-tension ignition system, the current in the magneto secondary winding is induced when the primary circuit is interrupted. Spark plug heat range is determined by its ability to transfer heat to the cylinder head. If a spark plug lead becomes grounded, the magneto will not be affected. How does high-tension ignition shielding tend to reduce radio interference? Receives and grounds high-frequency waves coming from the magneto and high-tension ignition leads. Spark plugs are considered worn out when the electrodes have worn away to about 1/2 of their original dimensions. In the aircraft magneto system, if the P lead is disconnected, the magneto will be on regardless of ignition switch position. Why are turbine engine igniters less susceptible to fouling than reciprocating engine spark plugs? The high-intensity spark cleans the igniter. The purpose of an undercurrent relay in a starter generator system is to disconnect power from the starter generator and ignition when sufficient engine speed is reached. The secondary coil of a magneto is grounded through the primary coil. Thermocouples are usually inserted or installed on the hottest cylinder of the engine. If an aircraft ignition switch is turned off and the engine continues to run normally, the trouble is probably caused by an open ground lead in the magneto. Advantages of dual ignition in aircraft engines are a more complete and quick combustion of the fuel, provides a backup magneto system, and increasing the output power of the engine. When installing a magneto on an engine, the piston and cylinder one must be a prescribed number of degrees before top center on the compression stroke. What component of a dual magneto is shared by both ignition systems? Rotating magnet. Which of the following would be cause for rejection of a spark plug? Insulator tip cracked. Shielding is used on spark plug and ignition wires to prevent interference with radio reception. Failure of an engine to cease firing after turning the magneto switch off is an indication of an open P-lead to ground. Defective spark plugs will cause the engine to run rough at all speeds. Ignition check during engine run-up indicates excessive RPM drop during operation on the right magneto. The major portion of the RPM loss occurs rapidly after switching to the right magneto position, fast drop. The most likely cause is faulty or fouled spark plugs. What is the electrical location of the primary capacitor in a high-tension magneto? In parallel with the breaker points. When internally timing a magneto, the breaker points begin to open when the rotating magnet is a few degrees past the neutral position. When performing a magneto ground check on an engine, correct operation is indicated by a slight drop in RPM. What will be the effect if the spark plugs are gapped too wide? Hard starting. Which of the following are distinct circuits of a high-tension magneto? Magnetic, primary, and secondary. Refer to Figure 5. When an external power source is connected to the aircraft, the battery cannot be connected to the bus. In the event a pneumatic start valve will not operate, and the manual override must be used, the starter T-handle must be closed at scheduled starter dropout, because the starter will overspeed at a given N2. What is the relationship between distributor and crankshaft speed of aircraft reciprocating engines? The distributor turns at 1/2 crankshaft speed. Magneto pole shoes are generally made of laminations of high-grade soft iron. The electrical circuit from the spark plug back to the magneto is completed by grounding through the engine structure. A spark plug's heat range is the result of its ability to transfer heat from the firing end of the spark plug to the cylinder head. When will the voltage in the secondary winding of a magneto installed on a normally operating engine be at its highest value? Just prior to spark plug firing. When does battery current flow through the primary circuit of a battery ignition coil? When the breaker points are closed and the ignition switch is on. When testing a magneto distributor block for electrical leakage, which of the following pieces of test equipment should be used? A high-tension harness tester. A certain 9-cylinder radial engine used a non-compensated single unit, dual-type magneto, with a 4-pole rotating magnet, and separately mounted distributors. Which of the following will have the lowest RPM at any given engine speed? Distributors. A spark plug is fouled when its spark grounds without jumping electrodes. Which of the following breaker point characteristics is associated with a faulty capacitor? Coarse-grained. How does the ignition system of a gas turbine engine differ from that of a reciprocating engine? A high-energy spark is required for ignition. The E-gap angle is usually defined as the number of degrees between the neutral position of the rotating magnet and the position where the contact points open. Why are high-tension ignition cables frequently routed from the distributors to the spark plugs and flexible metallic conduits. To reduce the effect of the high-frequency electromagnetic waves emanated during operation. Magneto timing drift is caused by erosion of the breaker points and wear of the cam followers. Igniter plugs used in turbine engines have a long service life because they do not require continuous operation. Which of the following statements most accurately describes spark plug heat range? A cold plug is designed so that the insulator tip is reasonably short to hasten the rate of heat transfer from the tip through the spark plug shell to the cylinder head. The greatest density of flux lines in the magnetic circuit of a rotating magnet-type magneto occurs when the magnet is in what position? Full alignment with the field shoe faces. In order to turn a magneto off, the primary circuit must be grounded. In a turbine engine DC capacitor discharge ignition system, where are the high-voltage pulses formed? At the triggering transformer. The capacitor-type ignition system is used almost universally on turbine engines, primarily because of its high voltage and high heat intensity. Great caution should be exercised in handling damaged, hermetically sealed turbine engine igniter transformer units because some contain radioactive material. In a high-tension ignition system, a primary capacitor of too low a capacity will cause the breaker contacts to burn. Alignment of the marks provided for internal timing of a magneto indicates that the magneto is in E-gap position. In a 4-stroke cycle aircraft engine, when does the ignition event take place? Before the piston reaches TDC on compression stroke. Which of the following obtained during magneto check at 1,700 revolutions per minute indicates a short, grounded circuit between the right magneto primary and the ignition switch? Both. 1,700 revolutions per minute. R, 0 revolutions per minute. L, 1,700 revolutions per minute. Off, 0 revolutions per minute. How is the strength of a magneto magnet checked? Hold the points open and check the output of the primary coil with an ASAM meter while operating the magneto at a specified speed. When removing a shielded spark plug, which of the following is most likely to be damaged? Core insulator. At what RPM is a reciprocating engine ignition switch check made? The slowest possible RPM. In a low-tension ignition system, each spark plug requires an individual secondary coil. When the ignition switch of a single reciprocating engine aircraft is turned to the off position, the primary circuits of both magnetos are grounded. The purpose of a safety gap in a magneto is to protect the high voltage winding from damage. Inspection of pneumatic starters by maintenance technicians usually includes checking the oil level and magnetic drain plug condition. Ignition check during engine run-up indicates a slow drop in RPM. This is usually caused by incorrect ignition timing or valve adjustment. What is the difference between a low-tension and a high-tension engine ignition system? A low-tension system uses a transformer coil near the spark plugs to boost voltage, while the high-tension system voltage is constant from the magneto to the spark plugs. The constrained gap igniter plug used in some gas turbine engines operates at a cooler temperature because the construction is such that the spark occurs beyond the face of the combustion chamber liner. What will be the result of increasing the gap of the breaker points in a magneto? Advance the spark and decrease its intensity. What is the radial location of the 2 north poles of a 4-pole rotating magnet in a high-tension magneto? Minus 180 degrees apart. Generally, when removing a turbine engine igniter plug, in order to eliminate the possibility of the technician receiving a lethal shock, the ignition switch is turned off and the igniter lead is disconnected from the plug, and the center electrode grounded to the engine after disconnecting the transformer exciter input lead and waiting the prescribed time. How are most radial engine spark plug wires connected to the distributor block? By use of cable piercing screws. Hot spark plugs are generally used in aircraft power plants with comparatively low operating temperatures. The spark occurs at the spark plug when the ignition's primary circuit is broken. When using an electric starter motor, current usage is highest at the start of motor rotation. Refer to Figure 5. With power applied to the bus bar, what wire supplies standby power to the starter relay contact? -4. As an aircraft engine's speed is increased, the voltage induced in the primary coil of the magneto increases. The type of ignition system used on most turbine aircraft engines is capacitor discharge. Air turbine starters are generally designed so that reduction gear distress or damage may be detected by inspection of a magnetic chip detector. When timing a magneto internally, the alignment of the timing marks indicates that the magnets are in the E-gap position. When internally timing a magneto, the breaker points begin to open when the magnet poles are a few degrees beyond the neutral position. How many secondary coils are required in a low-tension ignition system on an 18-cylinder engine? -36. What is a result of flashover in a distributor? Conductive carbon trail. 1. The platinum and iridium ground electrodes used on fine wire spark plugs are extremely brittle and can be broken if they are improperly handled or adjusted. 2. When gapping massive electrode spark plugs, a wire gauge should be inserted between the center and ground electrodes while moving the ground electrode in order to avoid setting the gap too close. Regarding the above statements, only one is true. Capacitance after firing in most modern spark plugs is reduced by the use of a built-in resistor in each plug. Using a cold spark plug in a high-compression aircraft engine would probably result in a normal operation. What is the approximate position of the rotating magnet in a high-tension magneto when the points first close? Full register. What test instrument could be used to test an ignition harness for suspected leakage? A high-tension lead tester. Magneto breaker points must be timed to open when the greatest magnetic field stress exists in the magnetic circuit. The primary advantage of pneumatic air turbine starters over comparable electric starters for turbine engines is its high power-to-weight ratio. What likely effect would a cracked distributor rotor have on a magneto? Ground the secondary circuit through the crack. Pneumatic starters are usually designed with what types of airflow impingement systems? Radial inward flow turbine and axial flow turbine. When using a timing light to time a magneto to an aircraft engine, the magneto switch should be placed in the both position. A clicking sound heard at engine coast down in a pneumatic starter incorporating a Sprague clutch ratchet assembly is an indication of the pawls recontacting and riding on the ratchet gear. What components make up the magnetic system of a magneto? Rotating magnet, the pole shoes, the pole shoe extensions, and the coil core. Airflow to the pneumatic starter from a ground unit is normally prevented from causing starter overspeed during engine start by activation of a flyweight cutout switch. Refer to Figure 5. If wire 8 is broken or disconnected after starter rotation is initiated, and the power lever is advanced, the starting sequence will continue normally. The purpose of staggered ignition is to compensate for diluted fuel-air mixture around exhaust valve. Refer to Figure 5. Which malfunctions will allow the igniters to operate when tested but be inoperative during a start attempt? Wire 10 is broken and/or the ignition relay is inoperative. What should be used to clean grease or carbon tracks from capacitors or coils that are used in magnetos? Acetone. Which statement is correct regarding the ignition system of a turbine engine? The system is normally de-energized as soon as the engine starts. Upon inspection of the spark plugs in an aircraft engine, the plugs were found caked with a heavy black soot. This indicates a rich mixture. A safety feature usually employed in direct cranking starters that is used to prevent the starter from reaching burst speed is the stator nozzle design that chokes airflow and stabilizes turbine wheel speed. A defective primary capacitor in a magneto is indicated by burned and pitted breaker points. If new breaker points are installed in the magneto on an engine, it will be necessary to time the magneto internally and the magneto to the engine. When the switch is off in a battery ignition system, the primary circuit is opened. A pilot reports that the fuel pressure fluctuates and exceeds the upper limits whenever the throttle is advanced. The most likely cause of the trouble is a sticking fuel pump relief valve. Which of the following turbine fuel filters has the greatest filtering action of any present-day filter type? Micron filter. Excessively rich or lean idle mixtures result in incomplete combustion. A mixture ratio of 11. One normally refers to -1 part fuel to 11 parts air. What precautions should be taken when putting thread lubricant on a tapered pipe plug in a carburetor float bowl? Engage the first thread of the plug. Then put a small amount of lubricant on the second thread and screw the plug in. It is necessary to control acceleration and deceleration rates in turbine engines in order to prevent blowout or die-out. If the main air bleed of a float-type carburetor becomes clogged, the engine will run, rich at rated power. During the operation of an aircraft engine, the pressure drop in the carburetor venturi depends primarily upon the air velocity. When an electric primer is used, fuel pressure is built up by the booster pump. If an engine is equipped with a float-type carburetor and the engine runs excessively rich at full throttle, a possible cause of the trouble is a clogged main air bleed. Which of the following is least likely to occur during operation of an engine equipped with a direct cylinder fuel injection system? Backfiring. Generally, the practice when trimming an engine is to turn all accessory bleed air off. The metered fuel pressure, chamber C, in an injection-type carburetor is held constant throughout the entire engine operating range. The device that controls the ratio of the air-fuel mixture to the cylinders is called a mixture control. The fuel systems of aircraft certificated in the standard classification must include which of the following? A positive means of shutting off the fuel to all engines. When troubleshooting an engine that will not idle, what would be a probable cause? Economizer valve not operating correctly. What could cause a lean mixture and high cylinder head temperature at sea level or low altitudes? Automatic mixture controls stuck in the extended position. During engine operation, if carburetor heat is applied, it will decrease the air density to the carburetor. Where physical separation of the fuel lines from electrical wiring or conduit is impracticable, locate the fuel line below the wiring and clamp the lines securely to the airframe structure. And if an engine equipped with a float-type carburetor backfires or misses when the throttle is advanced, a likely cause is that the accelerating pump is not operating properly. Where is the engine fuel shutoff valve usually located? Aft of the firewall. A fuel strainer or filter must be located between the tank outlet and the fuel metering device. When checking the idle mixture on a carburetor, the engine should be idling normally. Then pull the mixture control toward the idle cutoff position. A correct idling mixture will be indicated by an increase of 10 to 50 revolutions per minute before decreasing. Fuel pressure produced by the engine-driven fuel pump is adjusted by the relief valve adjusting screw. The use of less than normal throttle opening during starting will cause a rich mixture. In turbine engines that utilize a pressurization and dump valve, the dump portion of the valve drains the engine manifold lines to prevent fuel boiling, and subsequent deposits in the lines as a result of residual engine heat at engine shutdown. If the idling jet becomes clogged in a float-type carburetor, the engine will not idle. A fuel pressure relief valve is required on engine-driven vane-type fuel pumps. Maximum power is normally considered to be developed in a reciprocating engine with an air-fuel mixture ratio of approximately 1:12. What factor is not used in the operation of an aircraft gas turbine engine fuel control unit? Mixture control position. At what engine speed does the main metering jet actually function as a metering jet in a float-type carburetor? All RPMs above idle range. A 9-cylinder radial engine using a multiple-point priming system with a central spider will prime which cylinders? 1, 2, 3, 8, and 9. What should be checked/changed to ensure the validity of a turbine engine performance check if an alternate fuel is to be used? Fuel-specific gravity setting. When a new carburetor is installed on an engine and the engine is warmed up to normal temperatures, adjust the idle mixture, then the idle speed. A major difference between the Teledyne Continental and RSA, Precision Air Motive or Bendix, continuous flow fuel injection systems in fuel metering is that the Continental system uses fuel pressure only as a metering force. How will the mixture of an engine be affected if the bellows of the automatic mixture control, AMC, in a pressure carburetor ruptures while the engine is operating at altitude? It will become richer. If an aircraft engine is equipped with a carburetor that is not compensated for altitude and temperature variations, the air-fuel mixture will become richer as either the altitude or temperature increases. During idle mixture adjustments, which of the following is normally observed to determine when the correct mixture has been achieved? Changes in RPM or manifold pressure. What method is ordinarily used to make idle speed adjustments on a float-type carburetor? An adjustable throttle stop or linkage. Which type of pump is commonly used as a fuel pump on reciprocating engines? Vane. One purpose of an air bleed in the float-type carburetor is to decrease fuel density and destroy surface tension. The economizer system in a float-type carburetor increases the fuel-air ratio at high power settings. Which of the following best describes the function of an automatic mixture control, AMC? It compensates for change in the air density due to temperature and altitude. What is the relationship between the accelerating pump and the enrichment valve in a pressure injection carburetor? No relationship since they operate independently. Fuel is discharged for idling speeds on a float-type carburetor from the idle discharge nozzle. The throttle valve of float-type aircraft carburetors is located between the venturi and the engine. For what primary purpose is a turbine engine fuel control unit trimmed? To obtain maximum thrust output when desired. One of the best ways to increase engine power and control detonation and pre-ignition is to use water injection. An aircraft engine equipped with a pressure-type carburetor is started with the forward primer, while the mixture control is positioned at idle cutoff. Which of the following statements concerning a centrifugal-type fuel boost pump located in a fuel supply tank is not true? The centrifugal-type pump is classified as a positive displacement pump. Which statement is correct regarding a continuous flow fuel injection system used on many reciprocating engines? Fuel is injected at each cylinder intake port. If the volume of air passing through a carburetor venturi is reduced, the pressure at the venturi throat will increase. If fuel is found running from the carburetor with the engine not running, the likely cause is that the float needle valve is not seated properly. What effect does high atmospheric humidity have on the operation of a jet engine? Has little or no effect. Boost pumps in a fuel system provide a positive flow of fuel to the engine pump. What is a characteristic of a centrifugal type fuel boost pump? It separates air and vapor from the fuel. To determine the float level in a float type carburetor, a measurement is usually made from the top of the fuel in the float chamber to the parting surface of the carburetor. The function of the altitude compensating or aneroid valve used with the Teledyne Continental fuel injection system on many turbocharged engines is to prevent an overly rich mixture during sudden acceleration. Fuel pump relief valves designed to compensate for atmospheric pressure variations are known as balanced type relief valves. Kerosene is used as turbine engine fuel because kerosene has more heat energy per gallon and lubricates fuel system components. The desired engine idle speed and mixture setting is adjusted with engine warmed up and operating. The fuel metering force of a conventional float-type carburetor in its normal operating range is the difference between the pressure acting on the discharge nozzle located within the venturi and the pressure acting on the fuel in the float chamber in order to stabilize cams, springs, and linkages within the fuel control. Manufacturers generally recommend that all final turbine engine trim adjustments be made in the increased direction. Fuel crossfeed systems are used in aircraft to maintain aircraft stability. Which of the following best describes the function of an altitude mixture control? Regulates the richness of the fuel-air charge entering the engine. On a float-type carburetor, the purpose of the economizer valve is to provide a richer mixture and cooling at maximum power output. What component is used to ensure fuel delivery during periods of rapid engine acceleration? Acceleration pump. Why must a float-type carburetor supply a rich mixture during idle? Because at idling speeds, the engine may not have enough airflow around the cylinders to provide proper cooling. Select the statement which is correct relating to a fuel level check of a float-type carburetor. Do not measure the level at the edge of the float chamber. The Federal Aviation Regulations require the fuel flow rate for gravity systems, main and reserve, to be minus 150% of the takeoff fuel consumption of the engine. When air passes through the venturi of a carburetor, what three changes occur? Velocity increases, temperature decreases, and pressure decreases. Fuel boost pumps are operated to provide a positive flow of fuel to the engine. Reciprocating engine power will be decreased at all altitudes if the humidity is increased. The fuel level within the float chamber of a properly adjusted float-type carburetor will be slightly lower than the discharge nozzle outlet. Which statement is true regarding proper throttle rigging of an airplane? The throttle stop on the carburetor must be contacted before the stop in the cockpit. Which method is commonly used to adjust the level of a float in a float-type carburetor? Add or remove shims under the needle valve seat. Fuel lines are kept away from sources of heat, and sharp bends and steep rises are avoided to reduce the possibility of vapor lock. Most large aircraft reciprocating engines are equipped with which of the following types of engine-driven fuel pumps? Rotary vane-type fuel pump. The purpose of the diaphragm in most vane-type fuel pumps is to compensate fuel pressures to altitude changes. What carburetor component measures the amount of air delivered to the engine? Venturi. What are the positions of the pressurization valve and the dump valve in a jet engine fuel system when the engine is shut down? Pressurization valve closed, dump valve open. An aircraft should be facing into the wind when trimming an engine. However, if the velocity of the wind blowing into the intake is excessive, it is likely to cause a false high compression and turbine discharge pressure and a subsequent low trim on an engine equipped with a pressure-type carburetor. Fuel supply in the idling range is ensured by the inclusion in the carburetor of a spring in the unmetered fuel chamber to supplement the action of normal metering forces. The economizer system of a float-type carburetor performs which of the following functions? It supplies and regulates the additional fuel required for all engine speeds above cruising. An indication that the optimum idle mixture has been obtained occurs when the mixture control is moved to idle cutoff and manifold pressure decreases and RPM increases momentarily before the engine ceases to fire. What corrective action should be taken when a carburetor is found to be leaking fuel from the discharge nozzle? Replace the needle valve and seat. What causes the fuel divider valve to open in a turbine engine duplex? Fuel nozzle, fuel pressure. Refer to Figure 6. Which curve most nearly represents an aircraft engine's air-fuel ratio throughout its operating range? -2. Under which of the following conditions would an engine run lean, even though there is a normal amount of fuel present? Incomplete fuel vaporization. On a carburetor without an automatic mixture control as you ascend to altitude, the mixture will be enriched. How often should float carburetors be overhauled? At engine overhaul. 1. The mixture used at rated power in air, cooled. Reciprocating engines is richer than the mixture used through the normal cruising range. 2. The mixture used at idle in air, cooled. Reciprocating engines is richer than the mixture used at rated power. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. What is the purpose of the carburetor accelerating system? Temporarily enrich the mixture when the throttle is suddenly opened. An aircraft engine continuous cylinder fuel injection system normally discharges fuel during which stroke all continuously. Where is the throttle valve located on a float-type carburetor? After the main discharge nozzle in Venturi. Prior to performing engine trimming, you should obtain a true temperature reading, comparable to that of the air that enters the engine. What is the purpose of an engine-driven fuel pump bypass valve? To prevent a damaged or inoperative pump from blocking the fuel flow of another pump in series with it. The primary purpose of the air bleed openings used with continuous flow fuel injector nozzles is to aid in proper fuel vaporization. An electronic engine control, EEC, is a system that receives engine operating information and adjusts a standard hydromechanical fuel control unit to obtain the most effective engine operation. What are the principal advantages of the duplex fuel nozzle used in many turbine engines? Provides better atomization and uniform flow pattern. A punctured float in a float-type carburetor will cause the fuel level to rise and enrich the mixture. The device that controls the volume of the air-fuel mixture to the cylinders is called a throttle valve. Where is the main fuel strainer located in the aircraft fuel system? At the lowest point in the fuel system. Idle cutoff is accomplished on a carburetor equipped with a back suction mixture. Control by introducing low pressure, intake manifold, air into the float chamber. In a supervisory EEC system, any fault in the EEC that adversely affects engine operation causes an immediate reversion to control by the hydromechanical fuel control unit. Which of the following is not an input parameter for a turbine engine fuel control unit? Ambient humidity. What carburetor component limits the maximum airflow into the engine at full throttle? Venturi. An aircraft carburetor is equipped with a mixture control in order to prevent the mixture from becoming too rich at high altitudes. If a float-type carburetor becomes flooded, the condition is most likely caused by a leaking needle valve and seat assembly. A rotary vane pump is best described as VRIHO, positive displacement pump. 1. A non-positive displacement pump produces a continuous flow, but due to lack of a positive internal seal against slippage, its output will drop as pressure increases. 2. In a positive displacement pump, slippage is negligible compared to the pump's volumetric output flow. If the output port were plugged, pressure would increase, and the pump pressure relief valve would open. Regarding the above statements, both number 1 and number 2 are true. What is the final authority for the details of carburetor overhaul? The manufacturer's recommendations. Which of the following is not a function of the carburetor venturi? Regulates the idle system. An excessively lean air-fuel mixture may cause an increase in cylinder head temperature. What is the relationship between the pressure existing within the throat of a venturi and the velocity of the air passing through the venturi? The pressure is inversely proportional to the velocity. Select the correct statement concerning the idle system of a conventional float-type carburetor. The low pressure between the edges of the throttle valve and the throttle body pulls the fuel from the idle passage. A carburetor is prevented from leaning out during quick acceleration by the refer to Figure 7. What is the purpose of the fuel transfer ejectors? To assist in the transfer of fuel from the main tank to the boost pump sump. When trimming a turbine engine, the fuel control is adjusted to set idle RPM and maximum speed or EPR. What is a function of the idling air bleed in a float-type carburetor? It aids in emulsifying, vaporizing the fuel at idle speeds. Which of the following causes a single diaphragm accelerator pump to discharge fuel? An increase in manifold pressure that occurs when the throttle valve is opened. It is desirable that fuel lines have a gentle slope upward or downward and not have sharp curves or sharp rises and/or falls in order to prevent vapor lock. The fuel pump relief valve directs excess fuel to the inlet side of the fuel pump. The purpose of the back suction mixture control in a float-type carburetor is to adjust the mixture by regulating the pressure on the fuel in the float chamber. Which type of fuel control is used on most of today's turbine engines? Hydromechanical or electronic? The density of air is very important when mixing fuel and air to obtain a correct fuel-to-air ratio. Which of the following weighs the most? Minus 100 parts of dry air. The back suction mixture control system operates by varying the pressure acting on the fuel in the float chamber. One of the things a metering orifice in a main air bleed helps to accomplish at a given altitude in a carburetor is better fuel vaporization and control of fuel discharge, especially at lower engine speeds. The active clearance control, ACC portion, of an EEC system aids turbine engine efficiency by ensuring turbine blade to engine case clearances are kept to a minimum by controlling case temperatures. Under which of the following conditions will the trimming of a turbine engine be most accurate? No wind and low moisture. What is the purpose of the flow divider in a turbine engine duplex fuel nozzle? Creates the primary and secondary fuel supplies. What occurs when a back suction type mixture control is placed in ideal cutoff? The float chamber will be vented to a negative pressure area. What is the possible cause of an engine running rich at full throttle if it is equipped with a float-type carburetor? Clogged main air bleed. Float-type carburetors, which are equipped with economizers, are normally set for their leanest practical mixture, delivery at cruising speeds, and enriched by means of the economizer system at higher power settings. During what period does the fuel pump bypass valve open and remain open? When the boost pump pressure is greater than fuel pump pressure. The primary condition that allows microorganisms to grow in the fuel and aircraft fuel tanks is R, the presence of water. A full authority electronic engine control, EEC, is a system that receives all the necessary data for engine operation and develops the commands to various actuators to control engine parameters. What will occur if the vapor vent float in a pressure carburetor loses its buoyancy? The amount of fuel returning to the fuel tank from the carburetor will be increased. Detonation occurs when the air-fuel mixture burns too fast. An engine becomes overheated due to excessive taxiing or improper ground run-up. Prior to shutdown, operation must continue until cylinders have cooled by running engine at idle RPM. High cylinder head temperatures are likely to result from a very lean mixture at high power settings. What is the purpose of an augmenter used in some reciprocating engine exhaust systems? To aid in cooling the engine. Reciprocating engines used in helicopters are cooled by a fan mounted on the engine. Increased engine heat will cause volumetric efficiency to decrease. Cracks in cooling fins that do not extend into the cylinder head may be repaired by removing the affected area and contour filing within limits. A carburetor air preheater is not generally used on takeoff, unless absolutely necessary because of the loss of power and possible detonation. If carburetor or induction system icing is not present when carburetor heat is applied with no change in the throttle setting, the wetter mixture will become richer. The most common method and generally the best conduction of heat from the inside of a cylinder barrel to the cooling air is accomplished by machining fins directly on the outside of the barrel. The greatest portion of heat generated by combustion in a typical aircraft reciprocating engine is carried out with the exhaust gases. Which of the following would be a factor in the failure of an engine to develop full power at takeoff? Improper adjustment of carburetor heat valve control linkage. In addition to causing accelerated wear, dust or sand ingested by a reciprocating engine may also cause silicon fouling of spark plugs. A method commonly used to prevent carburetor icing is to preheat the intake air. If a turbocharger wastegate is not able to close fully, the aircraft will not be able to reach its critical altitude. Which of the following statements regarding volumetric efficiency of an engine is true? It is possible to exceed 100% volumetric efficiency of some engines by the use of superchargers of the proper type. When operating an engine, the application of carburetor heat will have what effect on the air-fuel mixture, enriching the mixture until the AMC can make a compensation. Enriching the mixture until the AMC can make a compensation, a decrease in power, and possibly detonation. What is the purpose of the rate of change controller in a turbocharger system? Controls the rate at which the turbocharger discharge pressure will increase. Aircraft reciprocating engine cylinder baffles and deflectors should be repaired as required to prevent loss of cooling. During full power output of an unsupercharged engine equipped with a float-type carburetor, in which of the following areas will the highest pressure exist? Carburetor air scoop. In an airplane equipped with an alternate air system, if the main air duct air filter becomes blocked or clogged, the system will automatically allow warm, unfiltered air to be drawn into the engine. The purpose of an intercooler when used with a turbocharger is to cool the air entering the carburetor from the turbocharger. Generally, a small crack just started in a cylinder baffle may be stop drilled. The application of carburetor heat during engine operation will decrease the weight of the fuel air charge. When starting an engine equipped with a carburetor air heater, in what position should the heater be placed? Cold. If an engine air filter element is not routinely cleaned and becomes excessively dirty, it can cause both A and B are true. An increase in manifold pressure when carburetor heat is applied indicates ice was forming in the carburetor. Into what part of a reciprocating engine induction system is de-icing alcohol normally injected? The airstream ahead of the carburetor. As manifold pressure increases in a reciprocating engine, the density of air in the cylinder increases. Where are cooling fins usually located on air-cooled engines? Cylinder head, cylinder barrel, and inside the piston. Carburetor icing is most severe at air temperatures between 30 and 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Prolonged idling of an engine will usually result in foreign material buildup on spark plugs. How do cowl flaps aid in cooling a horizontally opposed aircraft engine? Controls the amount of air flowing around the cylinders. Which of the following results in a decrease in volumetric efficiency? Part throttle operation. What is the function of a blast tube as found on aircraft engines? A device to cool an engine accessory. During ground operation of an engine, the cowl flaps should be in what position? Fully open. What is the position of the cowl flaps during engine starting and warm-up operations under normal conditions? Full open at all times. A broken cooling fin on a cylinder head. may be filed to smooth contours if damage and/or repair limits are not exceeded. What part of an aircraft in flight will begin to accumulate ice before any other? Carburetor. What is the purpose of a turbocharger system for a small reciprocating aircraft engine? Compresses air to maintain manifold pressure constant from sea level to the critical altitude of the engine. 1. Some aircraft exhaust systems include an augmenter system to draw additional air over the engine for cooling. 2. Augmenter systems are used to create a low-pressure area at the lower rear of the aircraft engine cowling. Regarding the above statements, both 1 and 2 are true. When a fire guard is standing by during an engine start, they should be watching for potential fires that could start in the induction system or the exhaust system. The pressure between the turbocharger and the throttle valve is called upper deck pressure. The differential pressure controller in a turbocharger system reduces bootstrapping during part throttle operation. A malfunction that causes the turbocharger wastegate or controller to fluctuate will cause engine surges due to an erratic manifold pressure. During an operational check of an electrically powered aircraft engine cowl flap system, the motor fails to operate. Which of the following is the first to be checked? Flap actuator motor circuit breaker. And the carburetor icing on an engine equipped with a constant speed propeller can be detected by a decrease in manifold pressure with a constant RPM. The action of a carburetor air scoop is to supply air to the carburetor, but it may also increase the pressure of the incoming air by ram effect. Which of the following should a mechanic consult to determine the maximum amount of cylinder cooling fin that could be removed when cracks are found? Engine manufacturer's service or overhaul manual. Cylinder head temperatures are measured by means of an indicator and a thermocouple sensing device. What are the 3 basic regulating components of a sea-level boosted turbocharger system? Exhaust bypass assembly, density controller, and differential pressure controller. What directly regulates the speed of a turbocharger? Wastegate. The application of carburetor heat will have which of the following effects? The mixture will become richer. Boost manifold pressure is generally considered to be any manifold pressure above -30. HG. The primary purpose of baffles and deflectors installed around cylinders of air-cooled aircraft engines is to force cooling air into close contact with all parts of the cylinders. The purpose of a bell mouth compressor inlet is to maximize the aerodynamic efficiency of the inlet. What part of an air-cooled cylinder assembly has the greatest fin area per square inch? Exhaust valve port. Using compressor bleed air directed into a nozzle, a vortex dissipator's primary function is to destroy vortices that can suck debris from the ground into engines that are mounted in pods that are low to the ground. The undersides of pistons are frequently finned. The principal reason is to provide for greater heat transfer to the engine oil. What is used to drive a supercharger? Gear train from the crankshaft. If a fire starts in the induction system during the engine starting procedure, what should the operator do? Continue cranking the engine. If the turbocharger wastegate is completely closed, all the exhaust gases are directed through the turbine. Where would a carburetor air heater be located in a fuel injection system? None is required. What is the purpose of the density controller in a turbocharger system? Limits the maximum manifold pressure that can be produced by the turbocharger at full throttle. A bent cooling fin on an aluminum cylinder head should be left alone if no crack is formed. Which of the following defects would likely cause a hot spot on a reciprocating engine cylinder? Too much cooling fin area broken off. What method, say his, are used to provide clean air to the engines of helicopters and turboprop airplanes that have particle, sand, and ice separators installed? Sharp airflow directional change to take advantage of inertia and/or centrifugal force, and filters or engine inlet screens. Which of the following is a function of the differential pressure controller? it controls all positions of the wastegate except at fully open position. The purpose of a sonic venturi on a turbocharged engine is to limit the amount of air that can flow from the turbocharger into the cabin for pressurization. Which of the following assists in removing heat from the metal walls and fins of an air-cooled cylinder assembly? A baffle and cowl arrangement. The position of the cowl flaps during normal cruise flight conditions is closed. Carburetor icing may be eliminated by which of the following methods? Alcohol spray and heated induction air. One source commonly used for carburetor air heat is exhaust gases. Bootstrapping of a turbocharged engine is indicated by a transient increase in engine power. On small aircraft engines, fuel vaporization may be increased by circulating the fuel and air mixture through passages in the oil sump. The components in a turbine engine that operate this at the highest temperatures are the first stage turbine nozzle guide vanes, the vortex dissipators installed on some turbine-powered aircraft to prevent engine FOD utilize, a stream of engine bleed air blown toward the ground ahead of the engine. The purpose of an engine inlet anti-ice system is primarily to prevent ice formation in engine and/or inlet areas. Which statement is true regarding the air passing through the combustion section of a jet engine? Most is used for engine cooling. What engine instrument indications may shift when a turbofan engine anti-icing bleed air system is turned on? Tachometer, EGT, and EPR. Vortex dissipator systems are generally activated by a landing gear switch. When an engine with a subsonic divergent type inlet duct is running in place at high speed on the ground, the air pressure within the inlet is positive. The purpose of cascade vanes in a thrust reversing system is to turn to a forward direction the fan and/or hot exhaust gases that have been blocked from exiting through the exhaust nozzle. Which of the following indicates that a combustion chamber of a jet engine is not operating properly? Hotspots on the tail cone. Dislodged internal muffler baffles on a small reciprocating engine may cause excessive exhaust back pressure. How may reciprocating engine exhaust system leaks be detected? Signs of exhaust soot inside cowling and on adjacent components. Power recovery turbines used on some reciprocating engines are driven by the velocity of the exhaust gases. How should corrosion-resistant steel parts, such as exhaust collectors, be blast cleaned? Use sand which has not previously been used on iron or steel. What type of nuts are used to hold an exhaust system to the cylinders? Brass or heat-resistant nuts. How do the turbines, which are driven by the exhaust gases of a turbo compound engine, contribute to total engine power output? By driving the crankshaft through suitable couplings. Reciprocating engine exhaust systems that have repairs or sloppy weld beads which protrude internally are unacceptable because they cause local hotspots. Most exhaust system failures result from thermal fatigue cracking in the areas of stress concentration. This condition is usually caused by the high temperatures at which the exhaust system operates. Sodium-filled valves are advantageous to an aviation engine because they dissipate heat well. Reciprocating engine exhaust system. Designs commonly used to provide for ease of installation and/or allow for expansion and contraction may include the use of spring-loaded ball joints, slip joints, and bellows. The hot section of a turbine engine is particularly susceptible to which of the following kind of damage? Cracking. Which of the following statements is true regarding thrust reverser systems? The reverser system must be able to withstand high temperatures, be mechanically strong, relatively light in weight, and reliable. How are combustion liner walls cooled in a gas turbine engine? By secondary air flowing through the combustion chamber. What is the purpose of an exhaust outlet guard on a small reciprocating engine? to prevent dislodged muffler baffles from obstructing the muffler outlet. Select a characteristic of a good weld on exhaust stacks. The weld should taper off smoothly into the base metal. On an aircraft that utilizes an exhaust heat exchanger as a source of cabin heat, how should the exhaust system be inspected? With the heater air shroud removed. All of the following are recommended markers for reciprocating engine exhaust systems, except lead pencil. Operating thrust reversers at low ground speeds can sometimes cause hot gas reingestion, compressor stalls, and sand or other foreign object ingestion. On turbojet-powered airplanes, thrust reversers are capable of producing between -35 and 50% of the rated thrust in the reverse direction. Ball joints in reciprocating engine exhaust systems should be loose enough to permit some movement. What is the purpose of a slip joint in an exhaust collector ring? It aids in alignment and absorbs expansion. Compared to normally aspirated engines, turbocharged engine exhaust systems operate at higher temperatures and higher pressures. Thrust reversers utilizing a pneumatic actuating system usually receive operating pressure from the engine bleed air system. Engines using cold stream or both cold and hot stream reversing include high bypass turbofans. Turbojet and turbofan thrust reverser systems are generally powered by electricity, hydraulic pressure, and pneumatic pressure. How should ceramic-coated exhaust components be cleaned? By degreasing. What could be a result of undetected exhaust system leaks in a reciprocating engine-powered airplane? Pilot-passenger incapacitation caused by carbon monoxide entering the cabin. What is the proper operating sequence when using thrust reversers to slow an aircraft after landing? Retard thrust levers to ground idle. Raise thrust reverser levers as required, and retard thrust reverser levers to ground idle. Augmenter tubes are part of which reciprocating engine system? Exhaust. The rearward thrust capability of an engine with the thrust reverser system deployed is less than its forward capability. Why is high nickel chromium steel used in many exhaust systems? Corrosion resistance and low expansion coefficient. Repair of exhaust system components is not recommended to be accomplished in the field. What operational force tends to bend the propeller blades forward at the tip? Thrust bending force. When engine power is increased, the constant speed propeller tries to function so that it will maintain the RPM, increase the blade angle, and maintain a low angle of attack. What is the primary purpose of the metal tipping which covers the blade tips and extends along the leading edge of each wood propeller blade? To prevent impact damage to the tip and leading edge of the blade. The thrust produced by a rotating propeller is a result of an area of decreased pressure immediately in front of the propeller blades. Propeller blade tracking is the process of determining the positions of the tips of the propeller blades relative to each other. The primary purpose of the front and rear cones for propellers that are installed on splined shafts is to position the propeller hub on the splined shaft. 1. During takeoff, propeller thrust pull is greatest if the blade angle of attack is low and the engine power setting is high. 2. With the aircraft stationary, propeller thrust is greatest if the blade angle of attack is high and the engine power setting is high. Regarding the above statements, only one is true. In what position is the constant speed propeller control placed to check the magnetos? Full increase, low propeller blade D pitch angle. A constant speed propeller provides maximum efficiency by adjusting blade angle for most conditions encountered in flight. Where are the high and low pitch stops of a Hamilton standard constant speed or two-position flyweight propeller located? In the flyweight assembly. Propeller fluid anti-icing systems generally use which of the following? Isopropyl alcohol. Why is a constant speed flyweight propeller normally placed in full high pitch position before the engine is stopped? To prevent exposure and corrosion of the pitch changing mechanism. Which of the following methods is used to straighten a bent aluminum propeller blade that is within repairable limits? Cold straightening only. How does the aerodynamic twisting force affect operating propeller blades? It tends to turn the blades to a high blade angle. Which of the following defects is cause for rejection of wood propellers? Bonding or separation of the trailing edge of the propeller blade. Minor surface damage located in the repairable area, but not on the leading or trailing edges of aluminum blades, may be repaired by first, filing with a riffle file. Removal of propeller blade tips within type certificate. Data sheet limits when correcting a defect is a major repair. 1. A mechanic certificate with a power plant rating authorizes the holder to repair deep scars, nicks, and dents on aluminum propeller blades. 2. A mechanic certificate with a power plant rating authorizes the holder to perform minor straightening of steel propeller blades. Regarding the above statements, neither 1 nor 2 is true. What controls the constant speed range of a constant speed propeller? The mechanical limits in the propeller pitch range. On twin-engine aircraft, the propeller auto-feather system is activated when engine power loss results in a propeller thrust drop to a preset value. What operational force causes the greatest stress on a propeller? Centrifugal force. Grease used in aircraft propellers reduces the frictional resistance of moving parts and is easily molded into any form under pressure. This statement defines anti-friction and plasticity. Characteristics of grease. During the on-speed condition of a propeller, the centrifugal force of the governor flyweights is equal to the speeder's spring force. During engine operation at speeds lower than those for which the constant speed propeller control can govern in the increased RPM position, the propeller will remain in the full low pitch position. Maximum taper contact between crankshaft and propeller hub is determined by using bearing blue color transfer. Which of the following statements about constant speed flyweight propellers is also true when referring to two-position flyweight propellers? Blade angle changes are accomplished by the use of two forces, one hydraulic and the other centrifugal. Which of the following occurs to cause front cone bottoming during propeller installation? The front cone contacts the ends of the shaft splines, preventing the front and rear cones from being tightened against the cone seats in the propeller hub. The holding coil on a hydromatic propeller feathering button switch holds a solenoid relay closed that applies power to the propeller, feathering pump motor. Which of the following forces or combination of forces operates to move the blades of a constant speed flyweight propeller to the high pitch position? Centrifugal force acting on the flyweights. Which of the following functions requires the use of a propeller blade station? Measuring blade angle. Proper operation of electric de-icing boots on individual propeller blades may best be determined by feeling the sequence of boot heating and have an assistant observe the load meter indications. The purpose of permanently sealing and partially filling some models of Macaulay propeller hubs with dyed oil is to make the location of cracks readily apparent. What is indicated when the front cone bottoms while installing a propeller? Rear cone should be moved forward. Propeller blade angle is the angle between the chord of the blade and the rotational plane of the propeller. How can a steel propeller hub be tested for cracks? By magnetic particle inspection. Which of the following is identified as the cambered or curved side of a propeller blade, corresponding to the upper surface of a wing airfoil section? Blade back. An aircraft's propeller system. Beta range is used to produce zero or negative thrust. The primary purpose of a propeller is to change engine horsepower to thrust. Which of the following best describes the blade movement of a full feathering, constant speed propeller that is in the low RPM position when the feathering action is begun, high pitch directly to feather position? When preparing a propeller blade for inspection, it should be cleaned with mild soap and water. What is the result of moving the throttle on a reciprocating engine when the propeller is in the constant speed range, with the engine developing cruise power? Opening the throttle will cause an increase in blade angle. What operational force tends to increase propeller blade angle? Aerodynamic twisting force. Cold straightening a bent aluminum propeller blade may be accomplished by an appropriately rated repair station or the manufacturer. How is a propeller controlled in a large aircraft with a turboprop installation? By the engine power lever. Propeller aerodynamic thrust imbalance can be largely eliminated by correct blade contouring and angle setting. When lubricating a newly overhauled steel hub propeller, you should lubricate the propeller after 1 to 2 hours of operation. After proper removal of aluminum blade damage, the affected surface should be polished with very fine sandpaper or crocus cloth. One of the advantages of inspecting an aluminum propeller utilizing dye-penetrant inspection procedure is that it shows whether visible lines and other marks are actually cracks rather than scratches. The centrifugal twisting moment of an operating propeller tends to reduce the pitch angle. How is anti-icing fluid ejected from the slinger ring on a propeller? By centrifugal force. During which of the following conditions of flight will the blade pitch angle of a constant speed propeller be the greatest? High speed, high altitude cruising flight. What is a function of the automatic propeller synchronizing system on multi-engine aircraft? To control engine RPM and reduce vibration. Inspection of aluminum propeller blades by dye-penetrant inspection is accomplished to detect fatigue failure. The centrifugal twisting force acting on a propeller blade is greater than the aerodynamic twisting force and tends to move the blade to a lower angle. The propeller blade angle is defined as the acute angle between the airfoil section chord line at the blade reference station and which of the following? The plane of rotation. Propeller blade stations are measured from the hub center line. The primary purpose of a cuff on a propeller is to increase the flow of cooling air to the engine nacelle. It is important that nicks in aluminum alloy propeller blades be repaired as soon as possible in order to eliminate stress concentration points. The propeller governor controls the oil to and from the pitch changing mechanism. Blade angle is an angle formed by a line perpendicular to the crankshaft and a line formed by the chord of the blade. Which of the following is used to correct horizontal unbalance of a wood propeller? Solder. Generally, unless otherwise specified by the manufacturer, repairs of nicks, scratches, gouges, etc. on aluminum propeller blades must be made parallel to the length of the blade. What unit in the propeller anti-icing system controls the output of the pump? Rheostat. A fixed-pitch wooden propeller that has been properly installed and the attachment bolts properly torqued exceeds the out-of-track allowance by 1/16 inch. The excessive out-of-track condition may be corrected by placing shims between the inner flange and the propeller. The purpose of a three-way propeller valve is to direct oil from the engine oil system to the propeller cylinder. If propeller cones or hub cone seats show evidence of galling and wear, the most likely cause is the propeller retaining nut was not tight enough during previous operation. The pitch-changing mechanism of the hydromatic propeller is lubricated by the pitch-changing oil. Which of the following determines oil and grease specifications for lubrication of propellers? Propeller manufacturer's instructions. Manually feathering a hydromechanical propeller means to port governor oil pressure from the cylinder of the propeller. What are the rotational speed and blade pitch angle requirements of a constant speed propeller during takeoff? High speed and low pitch angle. When running up an engine and testing a newly installed hydromatic propeller, it is necessary to exercise the propeller by moving the governor control through its entire travel several times to free the dome of any entrapped air. A power plant using a hydraulically controlled constant speed propeller is operating within the propeller's constant speed range at a fixed throttle setting. If the tension of the propeller governor control spring, speeder spring, is reduced by movement of the flight deck propeller control, the propeller blade angle will increase, engine manifold pressure will increase, and engine RPM will decrease. How is aircraft electrical power for propeller de-esser systems transferred from the engine to the propeller hub assembly? By slip rings and brushes. Which of the following generally renders an aluminum alloy propeller unrepairable? Transverse cracks of any size. What method would be used to inspect an aluminum propeller blade when a crack is suspected? Dye penetrant. What normally prevents a hard cell compact propeller from going to feather when the engine is shut down on the ground? A latch mechanism composed of springs and lock pins. Which of the following best describes the blade movement of a feathering propeller that is in the high RPM position when the feathering action is begun? Low pitch through high pitch to feather position. Flyweights on constant speed propellers are generally used to aid in increasing blade angle. For takeoff, a constant speed propeller is normally set in the low pitch, high RPM position. What actuates the pilot valve in the governor of a constant speed propeller? Governor flyweights. The application of more protective coating on one blade than the other when refinishing a wood propeller may be necessary to achieve final balancing. The actual distance a propeller moves forward through the air during one revolution is known as the effective pitch. Why is the pulley stop, screw on a propeller governor adjustable? To limit the maximum engine speed during takeoff. The low pitch stop on a constant speed propeller is usually set so that the engine will turn at its rated takeoff RPM at sea level when the throttle is opened to allowable takeoff manifold pressure. Ice formation on a propeller blade will produce unbalance and vibration. Which of the following best describes the blade movement of a propeller that is in the high RPM position when reversing action is begun? Low pitch directly to reverse pitch. During operational check of an aircraft using hydromatic, full feathering propellers, the following observations are made. The feather button, after being pushed, remains depressed until the feather cycle is complete, then opens. When unfeathering, it is necessary to manually hold the button down until unfeathering is accomplished. Both feather cycle and unfeather cycle are functioning properly. Oil leakage around the rear cone of a hydromatic propeller usually indicates a defective spider shaft oil seal. How is the speed of a constant speed propeller changed in flight? By changing the load tension against the flyweights in the governor. What operational force causes propeller blade tips to lag in the opposite direction of rotation? Torque bending force. Propellers exposed to salt spray should be flushed with fresh water. The primary purpose of a feathering propeller is to eliminate the drag created by a windmilling propeller when an engine fails in flight. Propeller blade station numbers increase from hub center line to tip. How is the oil pressure delivery on a hydromatic propeller normally stopped after the blades have reached their full feathered position? Electric cutout pressure switch. What action takes place when the flight deck control lever for a hydromatic constant speed propeller is actuated? Compression of the speeder spring is changed. Longitudinal fore and aft clearance of constant speed propeller blades or cuffs must be at least 1/2 inch, 12.7 mm, between propeller parts and stationary parts of the aircraft. This clearance is with the propeller blades. feathered, or in the most critical pitch configuration. Constant speed, non-feathering Macaulay, Hartzell, and other propellers of similar design without flyweights increase pitch angle using oil pressure. What is the basic purpose of the 3 small holes, numerous 60 drill, in the tipping of wood propeller blades? To allow the moisture which may collect between the tipping and the wood to escape, vent the tipping. Which of the following defects is cause for rejection of wood propellers? An oversized hub or bolt hole, or elongated bolt holes. On aircraft equipped with hydraulically operated constant speed propellers, all ignition and magneto checking is done with the propeller in which position? High RPM. A propeller synchrophasing system allows a pilot to reduce noise and vibration by adjusting the phase angle between the propellers on an aircraft's engines. Repairs of aluminum alloy adjustable pitch propellers are not permitted to be made on which of the following propeller blade areas? Shank. How does the propeller overspeed governor on a turboprop engine decrease propeller RPM? As oil pressure increases, the servo piston is pushed forward and the feather spring is compressed. When the centrifugal force acting on the propeller governor flyweights overcomes the tension on the speeder spring, a propeller is in what speed condition? Overspeed. On most reciprocating multi-engine aircraft, automatic propeller synchronization is accomplished through the actuation of the propeller governors. If a blade of a particular metal propeller is shortened because of damage to the tip, the remaining blades must be reduced to conform with the shortened blade. Most engine propeller combinations have one or more critical ranges within which continuous operation is not permitted. Critical ranges are established to avoid severe propeller vibration. The angle of attack of a rotating propeller blade is measured between the blade chord or face and which of the following? Relative airstream. The blade angle of a fixed pitch propeller is smallest at the tip. Geometric pitch of a propeller is defined as the effective pitch plus slippage. If a flanged propeller shaft has dowel pins, the propeller can only be installed in a given position. What type of imbalance will cause a 2-blade propeller to have a persistent tendency to come to rest in a horizontal position, with the blades parallel to the ground, while being checked on a propeller balancing beam? Vertical. The aerodynamic force acting on a rotating propeller blade operating at a normal pitch angle tends to increase the pitch angle. Apparent engine roughness is often a result of propeller unbalance. The effect of an unbalanced propeller will usually be greater at high RPM. What is the purpose of an arbor used in balancing a propeller? To support the propeller on the balance knives. Which of the following statements concerning the installation of a new fixed-pitch wood propeller is true? Inspect the bolts for proper torque after the first flight and after the first 25 hours of flying. The primary reason for careful inspection and prompt repairing of minor surface defects, such as scratches, nicks, gouges, etc., on aluminum alloy propellers is to prevent fatigue failure. When lubricating a Hartzell propeller blade with grease, to prevent damage to the blade seals, the service manual may recommend on some models to remove one of the 2 Zerk fittings for the blade and grease the blade through the remaining fitting. Surface treatment to counter the effects of dye-penetrant inspection on a propeller is accomplished by washing off with solvent. What will happen to the propeller blade angle and the engine RPM if the tension on the propeller governor control spring, speeder spring, is increased? Blade angle will decrease and RPM will increase.